Boom. We are live. It is Friday. Hope everybody is feeling good. It was a great day here in Montreal today, man. Like 23 degrees. It's nearly happening, guys. It's nearly happening. So this evening we got a good one. I think I'm just going to get this started right now. All right. What's good, y'all? This is C Certified Brewhead, and welcome to episode 65 of Beer and Other Shit, the podcast, Adjunct series, Quarantine Edition. That's a lot of episodes. Who would have thought? This evening, we have a great podcast. This is one we were meant to do prior to all of this craziness in person at the brewery. As you know, things happen how they did. So this was the next best thing that we could come up with. But before I introduce these gentlemen, got the sponsor. You know the drill, guys. This evening's podcast is brought to you by Dr. Nick's Amazing Man Stuff, a beard product company for humans with beards based out of Massachusetts. These guys are super cool. We did an episode with Dr. Nick, who I don't believe is an actual doctor, but whatever. He was super cool and explained everything to us as far as the way these guys work. So I'm not a beard product guy typically. I've been using these since January. We only started working with them in April, so I got to use it for a solid 3 months. I really enjoyed the product. It's helped, my things are a little raggedy right now, but it's kept everything so much softer. I like the smells of it. It's just like a pleasure to use this stuff. So they do everything here locally. So when I say locally, I guess I mean the States. So all the packaging is all from the States. It's not imported from China or somewhere else. It's only using essential oils from a Reiki master in Hawaii that blesses the stuff, as opposed to those cheaper fragrance oils. For like 1 ounce bottle of the essential oils, they're paying like 150, 200 US for those type of things that are actually made from the things they're meant to smell like. For example, there's these aren't the ones I'm talking about tonight, but they have a beard beer where they replicate, an IPA and a stout, and it actually has a scent of hops, and they actually put hops in the essential oils and actually let it soak it up. They put coffee, they put vanilla in the oils. So it's all like super organic, real products. The one I'm talking about tonight, this is one of their beard oils. They have a signature series. So these are just their scents are like zero. It's this one is like non-scented. So it just kind of smells like oil, but it doesn't really smell like anything, but gives you beer a nice little softness to it. And number 9 is super cool. It smells like lavender, orange blossom, and sandalwood. So it's super, earthy, woodsy, I guess. But it's a super. I think I have this one on right now. It's really, really great product. We don't really do this sponsor thing here too often at all. So if we decide to work with someone, it's because they have like a craft beer ethos, and these guys really lived up to that. They're actually doing a Brewmaster series, it's called, with brewmasters in the States, like big names. They're actually recreating their beers in beard oil form, including Lawson's, Treehouse, Trillium, Vitamin C. So, these guys aren't messing around. Of course, we have a deal. If you use the code BAOS21, BAOS21, you get 15% off your first order. Or maybe any order. Maybe you do multiple orders with it. Probably try it. These things are only like $20 a pop. So if you order a couple of them, and it's over $40, it's free shipping in North America. So, mate, you can't go wrong. Get them for yourself or someone who has a beard, mate. They've made my face feel lovely. My girlfriend loves them, so, mate, can't say anymore. So, with that done, the gentlemen we have tonight are doing something very interesting, unique, and special in Toronto. Their brewery's been open they'll tell us more about it, not that long, a year and a bit. They've been doing some fantastic, high-quality, all local beers. I'm just going to bring them on. We have Brandon and Max from Avling in Toronto. Boys, welcome. Good to see you guys, man. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a good while. It's nice to be on.
Yeah, man, good to see you guys. This evening we got a great lineup of beers. We're going to get the full history finally. Like I was saying, this was not how we all pictured this to go down. I know we'd all spoken about it, but we'll take it for now, So let's get it going. These beers, I'm really excited for this one. We're going to start off with the Magpie Hoppy Lager. Hit the crispies. I love this label, by the way. I love that gradient. It looks so clean. Tell us about this one, guys.
This beer kind of came about. We spent the last year and a bit during lockdown really focusing on process, especially a lager process, but also our IPA is always the non-lager that sells the best for us. So it's right there amongst all the lagers. So kind of learned a lot about hop usage and dry hopping, really improve the sort of really nitty gritty of our lager brewing, and we decided that it was a good time to marry those two things,
Right.
and make a beer that kind of took all of our sort of our Pilsner process and folded in some of our IPA process, and we ended up with this beer that's made with Australian hops and
Hence the name.
Ontario oats.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And Ontario oats, and just a really nice, crisp, clean, juicy, drinkable pale ale, basically, but it's a lager. So it just has a little bit more delicateness, and it just kind of it's a little more focused on the palate thanks to that cold fermentation.
I love it. Boys, cheers.
Cheers.
Smells great. Which Aussie hops are in here?
Predominantly Galaxy.
Yeah. Wow. Super bright, really tropical. Nice, crispy. The body is super, like, what is it, 5%? Yeah.
5%, yeah.
Yeah, little dry, touch little, like nice little grassy bitterness in there. So it's technically, so you're saying it's technically a pale ale? And it's...
I mean, its recipe would fall into the lighter side of a pale ale, if not fermented at 10 degrees. So
Interesting.
I know some people have been calling a beer like this a cold IPA. That's kind of floating around right now.
Yeah.
I know Matron made a cold IPA. So this is sort of in the same realm. I don't think it really has enough hops to
be that.
bear the IPA name. So
That's fair.
It's comparable to a pale ale, but you just can't. And as far as I'm concerned, and in my experience, you just can't get that type of the focus and the sort of snap, the sort of intense flavor that then folds back in on itself
Right.
as easily with ale yeast as you can with lager. That just tamping everything down allows you a little more control over that, and it's been really intriguing to see how this has developed through its maturation.
That's fascinating. I only heard about cold IPAs like 2 weeks ago. I'd never really I feel like they're starting to get some traction. And I was kind of struggling to understand what the real difference was. People were comparing them to like a different version of like an IPL sort of thing, which I guess is kind of the closest cousin to this type of thing.
Yeah, it's like an analog. Yeah, I would say it's you might go as far as to say it's a rebrand of an IPL. But I do think IPLs were around the craft brewing scene when lagers were a rarity. So I think probably the methods, the interest, the knowledge has all widened and improved across the whole industry with regards to lagers. So I think cold lagers or cold IPAs rather that are coming out now are going to be of a totally different level than maybe the IPLs or most of the IPLs you might have seen 5 or 6 years ago. People were just experimenting with lagers for the first time.
Right, and for you guys, I mean, being that obviously the times that we're in, there's a lot of it's a different volume perhaps than what you're normally used to. So did you have some like tank space or something that maybe you were finally able to do a few more of these types of beers?
Yeah, so Max and I talked, after the first summer, things were just so chaotic that we just basically put one foot in front of the other, trying to, rejig our entire brewery to like 100% packaging brewery when our model is brew pub. And then on Max's end, and I'm sure you can speak on the challenges of like pivoting the business in the same way, right?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's certainly, this, I think we were naturally on a course already towards focusing more on lagers. It seemed to be a real strength of ours and people responding well to them, which was really exciting for us. And so the opportunity to create a beer like this, which was just, it's just, I don't know, to me, this is kind of a feel-good beer in a lot of ways. It's really light. It's perfect for spring. Spring and summer, it just sort of, screams patio. And when the opportunity came along, it was a nice fit for us to take what is kind of becoming an unspoken but almost spoken focus of ours being loggers and marrying it with these beautiful Australian hops just in time for hopefully a bit of spring and a bit of some general relaxation of restrictions and whatnot.
Yeah, man, that would be perfect. It's really like a say like here. I don't know what you guys have out there as far as the restrictions for like drinking in parks and stuff, but here it's a pretty big thing. I think they took it away from you, didn't they? They had it and now they stopped it. God damn it! Like this is like a perfect park beer. It's nice and bright, tropical, light. It's not too much.
They've given it to us actually. It never
They have.
always it was it wasn't allowed for the longest time, and technically it's still not allowed. They just said that ticketing responsible drinkers in a park will not be a priority this summer. So make of that what you will.
Interesting. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's vague, but hey, I guess we'll take it.
Yeah.
I love it. This is great. This is fascinating. So, do you know what? I want to make sure we get the stories in the beer stories individually, and then we'll move that into to actually how the brewery came together, how you guys all connected. I don't know whoever wants to start, but if people hadn't watched it, I think it was episode 49 from the original series. Brandon was on the Lalo episode at the time you were consulting with the boys. Shouts to Dan and Colin. And that's when we first connected, and you did our first ever collab for my brother's album launch. So you and I, we go back a few years now. It's kind of great. That's 4 years ago. That's wild.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, man. Wow. So if people want to hear Brandon's like story in depth, like the whole thing, we went pretty deep in that. Definitely go check that out. But whoever wants to start, please go ahead. Let us know how you got into beer and sort of how you got to where you're at now.
Do you want to take it, Max?
Yeah, absolutely. So beer was a sort of not an accident, but it wasn't really the original plan. My first line of work was in restaurants as a cook. Worked here in Toronto.
So if you want to hear,
worked here in Toronto and in Montreal. Spent about a year working at Joe Beef and Liverpool House in Montreal.
No way.
Yeah, it was a fantastic time.
Cool.
Yeah, I had a really, really wonderful time working for those guys. And then it was actually I sort of was reaching a point where it was working out really nicely. I was loving Montreal, and I realized, if I didn't move on, I was sort of seriously at risk of never really leaving.
Never.
So,
That's how we end up here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I decided to keep on moving, and that took me to the UK, to London, and kept cooking. And it was while I was there that doing 15-hour days that I sort of thought, I was enjoying it for the most part, but it seemed like not the best use of my time if I was in a new country and only had so long there. So London was going through its own beer renaissance, its own kind of proliferation of breweries right the way across the city. So it seemed like a really interesting thing to try my hand at, in the sense that it was creative and technical, like cooking. I got to be on my feet all day, which is what I enjoyed, but didn't have to pull a 15-hour day, which was great. So I actually started volunteering for a brewery, which, as it turns out, was a laundry. That's an interesting story. The brewery founder had just gotten out of jail. He ran, I think it was about a 20 million pound cocaine ring. And after getting out of prison, he said, like, what's a cash business that's really popular right now? I know, I'll start a brewery.
That's
and
amazing.
so I only learned that around the time I was sort of ready to leave. I spent about a year there, and I was there longest tenured employee. So that was a wild introduction to the brewing world. But
what was the name of that brewery? Are you allowed to say?
Oh yeah, I mean, they've been bought by Carlsberg by now. It was London Fields. I think the owner has gone back to jail.
Okay.
He went back to jail for tax evasion of all things. Which is,
Oh, they always get you on that. They always get you on tax evasion.
And the Brits are really serious about their beer tax. Like they take it. Yeah.
They don't mess around. Sorry, man.
No problem. But from there, it was sort of thankfully a sort of many kind of continual steps up in quality and reputation. And as I said, sort of being in London at the time, breweries were growing just wildly quickly, and so I got a really fantastic exposure, sort of crash course in not only a lot of sort of brewing work, but logistics, management, distribution. You know, we did everything from lab work, brewing, cellaring, packaging. It was sort of all hands on deck, and it was really, really fascinating time. And I was sort of disappointed to have to leave the UK, but visas run out, and so came back to Toronto and had always had the sort of germ in my idea to start a brewery, or at least some sort of food related business. I'd always, sort of thought about returning to the kitchens, and Avling started to come together when I thought, okay, well, what if we can kind of bring these worlds together, and what might that look like? And for me, it really, coming from the culinary world where people are so detailed oriented and specific about what they're sourcing and how they're using it and what story that tells, I found that in brewing that there really wasn't a brewery that was sort of taking that approach. Not to say it's the right or wrong approach, but a lot of breweries were sort of bringing in whatever ingredients they wanted, which is creatively really liberating, but it kind of I thought that there may be something missing in terms of telling an interesting story about your region, or even if you're not sourcing from region, just picking a sort of a style or a group of styles to work on, and really kind of trying to master them. So that challenge was really interesting, and that kind of reflection of the culinary world really appealed to me. So yeah, that's kind of Avling. That was the sort of the beginning of Avling, and as it came together and we found a location, Brandon happened to be coming back from well, he had actually, he'd been back from school in Germany where he'd done beer studies, and we had worked together for a very brief moment. Actually, I don't think you could actually say that we worked together. I think I took Brandon's brewing job at Indie Ale House here in Toronto. So we sort of we bookended each other, and having I think just through, I can't remember what it was, Brandon, but I think just probably through the small community that is Toronto brewing, you heard that we were looking for somebody, and we had a conversation, and it seemed as though things, sort of visions were nicely aligned, and it just went from there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I had found out that because we had run into each other at Luffield and at Godspeed, just serendipitously, just chatting, and I had heard later on, which would have been a few months after the last time we'd seen each other, the project was sort of coming off the ground, and there was going to have the rooftop garden, and yeah, like you said, the vision seemed to really align, and I was kind of searching to see what my next move might be, and the sort of creative opportunities and sort of long-term vision just was like very, very attractive. So we had that conversation and got the ball rolling.
Amazing. And that was, so for the time frame, when did Avling open, and when did kind of the beginnings of it, like the genesis of it, start?
We had a classic brewery build.
The genesis of our conversation, or the genesis of Avling as an idea?
Probably both, actually.
Well, as an idea, it was sort of, probably sometime back when I was in the UK, back in, before 2014. But Brandon was about to kind of get into the story of our build out and eventual opening. We started, we had a conversation. I think there was snow on the ground. There was a lot of snow on the ground. I remember that. And I think was there?
There was, yeah. It was actually a really big storm that day.
Yeah.
It was like the biggest storm of the year happened later that afternoon. So I remember I was driving out to my friend's dad's memorial, and it was a harrowing drive. It's really harrowing drive. So those two things are stuck together in my mind. So it would have been the winter, and it would have been like February, maybe.
And then you didn't come on board until September of that year. and then we didn't open until the following July.
Okay, right. That's not too bad for a brewery to go down, I guess. No, what's that? 9, 10 months?
Well,
Yeah,
the
it was.
build-
It wasn't the worst I've heard of, but it was quite a challenge. The building, if anyone has been to Avling or seen pictures, is a pretty ambitious build, and it really kind of, in order to like have the full context of that, the building before construction was started was very old and not in very good repair. So there were walls, like exterior wall needed to be rebuilt. We took out 2/3 of the main floor, rebuilt 1/3 of it, and built a bridge between the two ends, which allows us to have that brewery that's sunk in the basement with enough head space or ceiling space to put the tanks in. So it required digging down in a fairly marshy area of Toronto. It required suspended concrete slab that's capable of holding a tremendous amount of weight. Then on top of all of that, you have your regular brewery challenges of plumbing and electrical and rigging tanks, and then your brand new brew house, which doesn't work the way you think it's going to work. And all the fun things that I think every brewer has been through.
Yeah. Excuse me. There you go, Max, please.
Well, I was just going to say the one particular trauma that Brandon's leaving out that I think probably is understandable is our equipment got caught up in the sort of the DME fiasco, and so
Oh no.
yeah, so we were certainly one of the lucky ones, but there was about a month where we really just sort of kind of our fate was entirely out of our hands, and it would have sunk the entire project. Thankfully, everything had been completed; it was crated up and just sort of waiting for delivery. But in the grand scheme of things, we were very lucky, though. It was a very uncomfortable month.
Yeah. For people who don't know what we're talking about, it was a company based in BC that were making most of the fermenters and the beer production equipment for breweries in Canada and beyond. And essentially, you guys can probably speak more to it. We don't have to go into detail, but just for context, they went under and they went into receivership, I believe. And then a lot of the breweries, including I know Indy, paid like $800K and they lost it all, which is wild. 800,000 is so crazy in an extension. I mean, they had a working brewery, but oh my god, I couldn't imagine. Like, and a lot of breweries lost money.
A lot of breweries lost everything. There's a lot of breweries that never got off the ground that no one's ever heard of because their equipment was lost in like the critical portion. And especially if you're a reasonably small brewery, the cost of your brew house might be most of the cost of your business. So if you lose it, or if you lose 50% of that, the financing might not be there for you to pivot at all, and it's just done. So there are many breweries who were sunk by that, which is why we count ourselves absolutely among the lucky ones, among the luckiest ones, because we actually got our equipment. But I was out at a bar with my friends, and I got a text from a brewing colleague. It's like 9:30 p.m. and the news comes out, end of day in BC. So, I'm rushing outside. I'm standing on Bloor Street. It's like late November in a t-shirt, making like 400 phone calls, trying to figure out what to do, because there was actually some value in being earliest to call to start to get the ball rolling, because things get gobbled up pretty fast, and certain equipment ends up in other places depending on how people handle receivership. It's somewhat of a muddy business. That's why they put locks on the doors when somebody gets shut down. Right. We were grinding really hard to coordinate getting it out and shipping it across the country on our own dime, which was something that we had already paid for once, and storing it and needing to commission it, which was something we had paid up front, NSI, to do this for us, and that evaporated, so we ended up having to pay for it again. And long story short, that was another huge hiccup, you know, on a very interesting curveball, but one we managed to, you know, get through. And we got the equipment, we got almost everything. All of the tanks came with none of the attachments they're supposed to come with. They were just empty stainless conicals, no valves, no manway gaskets, no pressure sensors, nothing. We got the racking arms. That was sort of a huge surprise and a win. So you're sourcing all of that as well, and meanwhile the building is still presenting 1,000 challenges a day. So yeah, it was quite the project, and you know, the results though make everything worth it. I think the building is it's unique. It's a very vibrant and well, you know, it's energetic but calming, which is a really sort of amazing balance that our architect struck. And it's the design of the building, especially architecturally, something I like to highlight as much as I can. I'm very proud of it, and I had really nothing to do with it, so I feel comfortable singing its praises because it's really special. It's really special what this company was able to design with Max's input, and it was it's really you know, through all that fire, we ended up with something really special. So we're quite proud of it.
That's great. Yeah, that's so great. I mean, look, it's a beautiful building too, man. Like, I've been there a couple times. Energetic yet calming is a great way to describe it. The tap room is bright, spacious, high ceilings. I love like the rounded bar in the middle of the right in the middle of the space, which I excuse me. I don't recall really seeing that type of thing often at all, if at all. The bridge that you were talking about, I don't think people are really picturing it. It's the coolest thing ever, to being able to, like, you know, leave from the tap room and you walk across this, like, I was going to say suspended, but it's not, a straight up concrete bridge. You can look either side, see all the tanks, and it's just so cool. And then coming into the I believe the retail store still on the other side. It was last.
No, it's up front.
No, up front now.
Yeah,
Oh, that would make sense with everything that's happening. But last time I was there, I think it was probably like February last year. I think I came once to see my brother, and I think you and I met, Max, and I came another time. I think it was in February, and then we came to see you, Brandon, and then you gave us the tour, and we checked out downstairs and the first barrels and all that type of stuff. And yeah, it's a super beautiful place and incredibly well located as well. The one thing I didn't get to see, and I'm annoyed I didn't get to see it, was the rooftop, obviously, but it was February and miserable and probably not that much happening. So I think, Brandon, you were like, nah, you got to come back in the summer, man. It's going to be cool. I'm like, I'll be back. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and then 2 months later, no one's going anywhere. Yeah, it was really right under the wire. But yeah, I'd stand by that. You kind of don't want to spoil it. You know, when you see it in June, when everything is in like full blown bloom, it's really quite an experience. I tend to spend time in the summer at the end of the day and just go up there and just sit. It's just like a calm. You know, being around plants is a very calming experience, and I count myself very lucky to be able to just walk up the stairs and sit among all of these things that our gardeners have grown. These beautiful crops, and many of them stuff you don't always see around Toronto or Ontario. Some creative, you know, herbs and plants, and some experimental stuff, and yeah, it's a cool part of the business.
Yeah, I love it. I just love the whole concept of having like a rooftop garden in the middle of the, you know, like one of the coolest areas in Toronto in the East End, and you're able to use these, you know, the herbs and the plants. And like you were saying, there's one of the beers we're drinking later that I imagine a lot of these beers. I'd actually love to know from each one as we go with what was from the you know, the rooftop. I know the marigolds, I believe, are in Orpheus. Things like that, which we'll get to, you know, down the track a bit. But yeah, it's just such a cool concept. I don't know if we want to get into that now, or if we want to maybe, I'm looking at the time, we're about half an hour in. I kind of maybe feel like we should get to the next one.
Yeah, why don't we save it for Orpheus? It's
love to talk. Great Great idea.
Yeah, it's a good story for that.
Sick. I'd love to. So the next beer, I believe, is staying in the crispy boy realm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll stick with Tahoma.
Yeah, let's go with Tahoma. It's a nice foil to the Magpie that we just drank. Where this is like a more sort of modern take on a hoppy beer using New World, especially Southern Hemisphere hops. Very crisp. The malt. The malt is not a driving part of the balance of the beer. It's all about the hops and a little bit of the freshness and acidity. Tahoma is a little more old school.
Okay.
It is a little more sort of Pacific Northwest, and it's still very fruity, but it's got some resin to it, and it's got a much burlier malt profile. It uses a different base malt. It uses a couple not specialty malts, but things like Munich, Vienna that really build out the richness of the malts, and all of that is sort of to present a different style of dry hop lager, one that has a bit of maybe a Vienna lager in it, maybe a little bit of that kind of deep maltiness, and it's one of my personal favorites. It's I think it's a beer that a lot of brewers would like as well. It's something you don't see a ton of anymore because a lot of drinkers are more interested in the newer stuff like Magpie, stuff like hazies. But I think these beers have a place, and I think be interesting to see whether palates come back around to them. We certainly Tahoma has been quite popular amongst our patrons, but the wider beer world is not quite. Is not really into those things right now.
Right. And what makes it old school is the malt profile specifically. Because I see dry hop lager, I think new school.
Yeah, so that's the thing. It's got a foot in both camps, and but yeah, like a hoppy beer that has a malt presence, sort of at this day and age is itself old school. Most hoppy beers don't have a malt presence at all, right?
Yeah, true.
And beyond that, it's got quite a bit of bitterness to it. It's a very clean bitterness. It's very front of your mouth, so it doesn't really stick around your cheeks or sort of get aggressive or feel astringent. But it's bitter enough to really kind of open your eyes. I always describe this as like my perfect spring beer. Because it's no matter the temperature, it fits the spring. If it's raining, it's got enough sort of intensity and warming ability to cut through the rain. But if it's unseasonably warm, this has still got all the fruit and hops and refreshing aftertaste that you're looking for.
I love it, boys. Cheers, get it in you. Yeah, this is dope. It's actually in contrast. It's actually really cool to have this back to back from Magpie after hearing these the explanations of the two beers. I'm definitely getting that darker malt. Like your Vienna, the Solari is one of my favorites ever. But I think it's that one. I think it's called Foxtail. The Zwickel, money. I love those two beers. So I like that this has got a bit of that. The darker malts in here, like just a touch to give it that different profile. So now I definitely understand because it's like a tang in this beer that I couldn't put my finger on previously. Am I describing that right? Like maybe it's just it's the way that the specific Southern Hemisphere hops hit this malt profile or something. But there's like this little sweet, not tart, but in that world. Unless I'm completely
No, you're not wrong. Yeah. One of the things that we really obsess about in all of our beers, but especially hoppy beers and a little less so in the lagers, but it still applies, is getting a nice level of acidity to it. We don't want beers to be tart that aren't supposed to be tart, but I always think of it like seasoning when you're cooking. Acid is at least as important as salt, and getting whatever dish it might be, whether it's a sauce or whatever, some shrimp or a nice stir fry, getting like a squeeze of lemon or a splash of vinegar. If you hit it at the right level, it doesn't really taste strongly of those of that fruit or that vinegar. It just pops the rest of the flavors. So, and here we do work hard to make sure that the beer gets to as low a pH as reasonably as it reasonably can, and that does give you a little bit of a twang that sort of brightens the beer, and especially with hops that it gets red as fruit when you have a little more acidity, because in your brain, in everyone's brain, you associate fruit flavors with the acidity that is natural in fruits. So if you can kind of find that balance where you're not it's not a sour beer, but it is bringing some of those fruit acidity characteristics out. I think it just makes the hops taste more like how you want them to taste.
Gotcha. I love it. That makes so much sense. I've always been curious about that. Yeah, this is a fantastic beer, and it's really cool to see the diversity between the within the same realm of styles that you guys do. And I've had that before. Multiple IPAs, all the different things, different saisons and grisettes and stuff. Before we even get into stuff like that, I don't even think we even really talked about what you both do at the brewery. I actually didn't know, Max, that you had started as a brewer. I had no idea. I thought you would be the brains behind it and the owner. But I guess multiple questions. What do you both do, and are there other co-founders or anything, or is that mostly your thing, Max?
Yeah, no, it's they're kind of our other partners. The bank being the largest one, and most demanding.
Of course.
But yeah, as you say, I sort of founder, owner, and wearer of many hats at the brewery. These days, it's been a lot of sort of helping to facilitate home delivery, helping to kind of focus and target the messaging around sales and social promotions. It's a lot about trying to assist and support sales, understand where it's worthwhile to just sort of send our sales reps, whose doors worthwhile knocking on, as opposed to who's kind of wound things down until things open up again. But in kind of easier times and better times, I sort of I see my role and what I kind of enjoy the most is having come from both the sort of culinary world and the brewing world a while ago now, I guess, is being a kind of go-between and helping to facilitate the collaboration between the three levels, the three departments, so brewery, kitchen, and garden. Because that's really kind of the heart of what Avling's all about. We're trying to kind of create these really beneficial on-site circular loops and try to kind of mimic the type of circularity, the type of shift in focus, of shift in approach to sourcing and production, and mimic that on site to the practices we'd like to see used more widely. So talking to the gardeners and understanding what is coming up over the season, and then trying to relay that to the kitchen, and hopefully have an insight as to what the reality of the kitchen is, and the reality of the brewery is, and what might be possible and what isn't possible, and sort of picking projects. That's really kind of where I get a lot of enjoyment out of what I do, and I think as we kind of month after month, as we get a little bit more experience, it's the whole system is really coming into its own.
I love it. That's great. That's some great context. And Brandon, so you are the head brewer, I imagine not the only brewer, but you run the show.
My title would be the head brewer. So I started alone at the beginning, and then not too long after we opened, we brought on our first brewer, Taylor, and she's been there since August of 2019.
Nice.
That's when we opened, right? So, yeah, August 2019. Yeah. She'll be coming up 2 years.
We've just
Yeah, we're coming up 2 years. It's hard to wrap your head around because the last year has just not felt like any other year. So it at once feels like less than 2 years and much more.
Yeah.
And then we recently brought on another brewer, Brittany, who is came on just about 2 months ago.
Okay.
So we're up to a team of 3 with different
3.
projects we do.
3, Brandon. She started
We
February. Just talk about how time
Oh, you're right.
goes.
Yeah, goddamn. Yeah, 3 months. Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. So there's a bunch of things I kind of want to get into as far as like, and you both touched on, the way that you guys aligned in the styles and things you wanted to brew. So I definitely want to get into that, but I also want to get into the maybe this might be good to set this out now, like kind of like the vision for the brewery, because you guys like maybe in a overarching type of umbrella way, as far as you guys do have. It's almost surprising because you were saying that you want to come and do a bit, and I'm probably paraphrasing. I may even be incorrect here, but do something a little more traditional. I know Brandon, you studied in Europe and you take all of this. You were doing all this stuff long. Like I didn't appreciate it when we met. Now it's my good Crispies are like my everything. I really appreciate it in the way I did it before, and luckily the beer world is moving in that direction. But you guys are doing a lot of traditional, for lack of a better word. I don't know if I like that necessarily, but styles that would have been around for a long time, and doing your own little twist on it. But obviously there's the local aspect that I'd love to get into. Maybe position that because it really sets the tone for all of the beers that we're going to get through tonight, and the way that you approach that. And I had an idea that's what it was, but I didn't realize it was like, oh, that's why we were talking about coffee stouts earlier, just kind of joking, and you're like, oh, we can't do those because it doesn't fit in with the ethos. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know it was that real. So I'd love to maybe get into a bit of that and that kind of overall vision and the way that you guys have sort of set this thing off with these real, like, fantastic, unique sort of framework for a brewery.
Yeah, so one thing Max and I have talked about a lot, like consistently through this, is how important it is that local beers or local anything is high quality. That local for local's sake is probably as a long-term strategy not the best it could be. You don't want people whose first foray into drinking a high percentage Ontario beer to make them think that Ontario ingredients can't make a good beer, and then you've kind of lost them, at least for a while, as a customer. It's your first impression. So we have been working hard to make sure that the beers we make with local ingredients are really high quality, and while also keeping in mind that there's expectations in Toronto of what kind of beer you can expect to get at a brewery. And that we don't want to be, so dogmatic that we don't make some of the beers that we think are really great and that we love. So, sort of the beers we're going through tonight kind of represent the different sort of buckets of beers that we make. So our predominant focus is these 3 kind of groupings. So the 2 lagers we just had are about just high quality lager brewing, which we think is sort of at once a growing trend that we're really excited about, and you can see it all across the states and increasingly in Canada, while at the same time being timeless. It's truly what's old is new in this case. That these styles of lagers have been around and been popular for this long because they're the right balance of intriguing and rich and something you can think about, but also something you can just drink and enjoy. And that focus on drinkability without sacrificing flavor is sort of what I think is timeless about it. As we move on, the next 2 beers we're going to have are part of our 99% series. So 99% of the ingredients in those beers come from Ontario.
Okay.
So that's sort of another grouping that includes tonight we're going to have our sort of cherry saison and Carillon, which is our honey beer, our bière de miel. That one marries the garden into the local focus. And then we'll have some barrel beers, which are also 99%, but represent a little more of a sort of elegant, more long-term, slow beer. Stuff that takes over a year to come to maturity, sometimes longer. And as we go forward, Max can touch on this. We're sort of working with local farmers to try to incorporate new grains and innovative or sort of regenerative farming techniques into some of the ingredients we use from Ontario. So it's not just about being local; it's about sort of investing in the like a sustainable food economy in this province.
Cool. I love it.
Yeah.
Max, go for it.
Well, I was just because that's really well said, and it kind of I think it bears mentioning that like the two lagers that we've had so far are actually kind of two of the outliers when it comes to the lagers we make. Really, what we quite deliberately what we started with and what we sort of established our name with was a really classic pils, followed pretty quickly by a Bohemian lager, a light Bohemian lager 3.9, which we were all kind of secretly wondering, quietly wondering if people were actually going to be interested, and then they were in a big way, which was really pleasing for us. But yeah, I mean, sort of turning attention to these 99 beers. Yeah, I think it's sort of an excellent point that Brandon made about local for local's sake is really not. It's not productive, but it's not going to benefit in the long run the sort of local food economy and sustainable food economy. And so, I think if we wanted to, we could make a lot more 99% beers, but we strike a little bit of a balance with, the lagers, and the traditional lagers are certainly something that we decided we want to make, and so there's a sort of a compromise there. But also, for want of the quality of ingredients from Ontario, we have to kind of cap it at a certain amount. We so far only source Ontario hops from one farm, and that's largely because we love their product, and we find it to be really consistent. In fact, it's improving. And so we've got to be careful where we use those hops, not just because they're so brilliant, but in terms of Ontario hops and the beers that we're able to make that are 99%, that's it. So it's not, we're not dogmatic about it, but it's sort of where we can and where we feel as though we can sort of put the best product forward. We put a lot of attention and are really thoughtful about it. Sometimes, like with I think either Carillon or the Cherry Saison that's up next, sometimes we have a little bit of latitude to play with, and particularly the Cherry Saison is one, just because of it is a tart saison. It's got a bit more sort of acid profile, as well as the cherries that also bring a pretty kind of commanding flavor. We didn't necessarily kind of compromise on flavor, but it was a bit of a roll of the dice. For the grain for that beer, we work exclusively with one pig farmer. We get all of our pork from one farmer, and he is sort of super forward thinking and progressive with how he raises his pigs. And this will make sense in a second. He moves his pigs around from field to field, to pasture, and they forage, they root around. They're largely, kind of eat what is naturally occurring in these fields. And in order to protect the soil, to encourage biodiversity, and to sort of ensure that his pigs have got the best things to eat possible, as I say, he moves them around from field to field. And the fields that are empty, he will plant grain in order to sort of stabilize and regenerate those fields. And so we normally he just cut that grain into some of his pig feed, the little bit that he does add to their diet, as opposed to what they can forage. But in the case of the saison, the Brevis, we took that grain from him, sent it to Barnell Malt, had it malted, and used it in this beer. So
Cool.
we sort of are stepping into that cycle of regenerative agriculture as a both a consumer and a producer, and creating a sort of novel income stream for a farmer that is doing really responsible, forward-thinking things. And that, for me at least, is one of the more exciting opportunities that we have as a sort of small brewery, is to be able to engage directly with individual farmers who are doing really important work in the context of changing how a food is grown and raised, and supporting them by, as I say, creating almost a completely novel income stream. We're able to pay more for that grain than he really would save in terms of saving on food cost. So we're able to kind of incentivize or reinforce these really positive loops, which is exciting.
That's so cool, man. I'm really glad you brought that side of things up, because it was great that, Brian, you touched on the beer stuff, which is super cool. Like I said, I wasn't aware that was the mandate here, which I love. And I also really love you both mentioned the local for local sake. I had a conversation with somebody recently where there was someone in one of the beer groups where like, oh, if you don't buy, don't go overspend on the hype shit, like buy local. Or like, well, what's local though? Like you're trying to, it's like local for local sake. What if the hype stuff is local? What if it's, So I really enjoy that conversation. But the other side, the name of the brewery is actually Avling Brewery and Kitchen. So I'd love to hear where that ethos comes through in the kitchen. Both, I guess, you got the garden, which kind of speaks for itself, and I imagine it's mostly local. When Ontario, what was the word? I don't know, like plants,
Like native crops, indigenous plants,
Thank
that
you.
kind of thing.
Crops, that's the word, exactly. And then also to the kitchen. I think I was aware of this mostly through my brother was telling me about how amazing the food is there, and you've got like a butcher type of situation happening. I think you guys, I'm not sure if you're selling the meat, but maybe do you want to just touch on what you guys are doing and how that ethos comes through into the kitchen, the food offering in the brewery itself, the butcher stuff, and then that garden, how it all plays together there. It's super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's. I mean, as I mentioned off the top, it's actually more the sort of ethos of the kitchen coming through to the brewery in some respects.
Right.
In so much that I mentioned we've got one pork supplier, we've got one beef supplier. In normal operating times, we bring in a side of beef and a whole pig and go through 100% of that sort of those 1.5 animals, as opposed to 15% of 120 animals. So, the kitchens that I admire, the kitchens that I worked in, it was really those ingredients were selective, really carefully selected, and they were there to tell a story, and that they were part of the chef's their worldview and what was important, and what was sort of they had an emotional connection to. And I think the best restaurants, even if you didn't know the chef's story, if you didn't really know why they were chosen, that still came through, and that kind of intangible quality is a big part of what makes the best restaurants in the world so excellent, and so kind of emotionally impactful. And so yeah, I mean, in the kitchen, we as much as we can, being a brew pub and being a sort of neighborhood restaurant that wants to be able to welcome as many people as possible. We try to have a one-on-one relationship with as many suppliers as we can. The whole animal procurement. We've work a lot with 100-kilometer Foods here in Ontario, which has been a huge, real champion for not just local food, but they sort of realized that a big missing piece of the puzzle is infrastructure. So small farmer, it's I'm not going to say it's not hard for a small farmer to raise crops and be successful. What is the barrier is how does that farmer get their product to market, and to what market? Farmers are good at farming. They're generally not great at marketing or distribution or logistics. And so 100 Kilometer has come in and identified those talented, responsible farmers and been that marketing, logistics, distribution tool for them, which has been huge.
Cool.
And as you touched on, the butcher that we've got is it's sort of it is a big part of our circularity. The why we're able to bring in whole animals because we have a really talented butcher that is able to make use of 100% of the animal that does come in, and even right down to the excess fat that comes off the animal. It goes to the butcher's wife, who makes it into soap. We sell that soap in at the retail store. We since having been closed, we've sold the sausages, chops, burgers, charcuterie. Charcuterie's been a huge win for us, and it just is an excellent part of the reality of using a whole animal. Charcuterie came about, yes, because it's tasty, but also you needed to save and preserve the animal that you couldn't eat the entirety of it all in one go. So it makes a lot of sense, and it's been fantastic for us. So in as many ways as possible, we try to connect each department and each person in Avling should kind of, there should be a clear line to the people on either side of them, and they should kind of hopefully see and hopefully be thinking about how it can all be connected. And I think we're so far doing a decent job of that.
That's so cool, man. I love hearing that whole, like, the full circle thing from, every element of the business. It all ties in. I didn't know about the soap and the pig fat. That is cool, man. Like,
so like on a really
love
basic
it.
level, like we grew some things like lavender, lemon verbena, herbs, that kind of thing. It obviously makes its way up onto the menu and into the beers.
Oh, of course, the lavender. Isn't it like a lavender saison or something, wouldn't it? A lavender
Yeah, Celine.
money. Okay, so cool.
Yeah, that was Taylor's beer. Our brewer Taylor, that was her first beer that she designed for Avling. So
I really enjoyed that one.
It's quite a success.
And that was from the roof. Yeah. Okay.
I was just gonna say, yeah, in from the kitchen, we make our own sourdough. The sourdough that isn't sold, we freeze, and then once we get to a certain amount of frozen bread, that then goes into our twice baked Hefeweizen. And then our spent grains go back to a farmer. So there's it's sort of no such thing as a byproduct, where somebody's byproduct can always be somebody else's input.
That is sick. I feel like that is not super common. Like this, I don't think I've ever heard this level of dedication to that.
I think it exists. It exists a little more. Not to. I think sort of the vision and the execution Max has put into this shouldn't be, lessened in any way. But we're not alone. This is becoming an important part of the future of food. It is to be more responsible about it, and the best way to do that is to reduce waste.
Right.
Recycling is really not the ideal solution. The ideal solution is not to have waste. Then you don't have to put energy or money into recycling things. So finding a way to get more use out of waste products is a first simple way that we started in the brewery, for example, with a beer we're going to have in a little bit. The Brevis is made almost entirely with cherry pomace. So we work with a juicing company that they take whole cherries and they juice them to create a cherry juice, and what's left over is usually organic waste. But the skins and the pits are completely full of flavor, and we are able to take what would be their waste product and reuse it in our brew house, and gain a huge amount of cherry flavor out of it. And then eventually it goes to organic waste, but it has been processed twice. It has been broken down to a very significant degree. So not only are we, doubling its sort of food value, we are also, starting the process of its sort of organic decay, so that when it does reach the organic waste disposal, it's on its way. So, um,
We did.
this kind of reuse. I know uh, there's a couple of restaurants I've been to. One in Copenhagen where they're using old coffee grounds, where they're using wastewater from rinsing mushrooms in order to make cheese. This kind of thing is becoming a really intriguing way uh, to reinvent food and to innovate food while at the same time, reducing your footprint.
Max, were you gonna say something?
I was well. I was just gonna kind of on the same note about using the juice company's waste. I mean, if we were to use fresh cherries ourselves, I mean those would have to come from at best Niagara, if not further away. So we're not only kind of getting second use out of this fruit and sort of taking it a step further to full decomposition, but we're getting a really flavorful beer that is chock full of cherry flavor, without having to, cherry puree would have to, cherries would be grown somewhere, they'd be taken to a facility where they'd be processed, and then they'd be flash frozen and then taken to a freezer warehouse, and then they'd be taken to a distributor, and then they'd arrive to us. So we're kind of cutting out all of those steps as well. So it's a small thing, but the more that we can kind of turn over these rocks and discover these opportunities, hopefully, I'd love if other people started doing this as well. I should also mention that this is the one opportunity that we give ourselves, the sort of one of the loopholes that we open up in terms of strict local mandate. We can use a product that's waste, that's sort of already been used. We let ourselves off the hook for Ontario only. So we've made beers with pineapple, lime, grapefruit, lemon, all of which have been pressed for juice. So obviously no Ontario pineapples, but we figure that they've made it here, they've been processed, so they've sort of honorary Ontario produce at that point.
I was actually thinking that because I've had the pineapple brevis before, and I was wondering how that worked. The only reason I thought go.
Yeah, with both the pineapple and the lime, this is another juicing company we work with. Same thing. In this case, we see a lot of value in reusing it. It is sort of a loophole we've opened up, but we do see pretty significant value there. There's a certain amount of food miles that go into that bottle of pineapple juice that you might have bought at an organic store or something. We sort of think if we have used the waste product, we've cut those food miles in half. So because the pineapples that went into that juice also went into our beer, they traveled the same distance, but we got double the product out of them. So each product represents kind of half of the food miles. So if we can extend the life, we reduce the food miles. With the lime and the lemon, it's the same kind of thing. There's just an unbelievable amount of citrus that's brought in, and obviously none of it's grown in Ontario. And there are you can obviously have citrus peel added. That's not what we choose to do. The citrus we use is not further processed. So there is some remaining juice in it. There is some pith in it, and they're basically reamed. So it is truly just a sort of raw byproduct of juice making. This allows us, again, as to Max's point, the skipping the steps in between also helps, because you're skipping energy. You're skipping gas from trucking it from one place to the other. We're taking it direct from their press to us. So there's only one trip to make, and I think the quality of fruit flavor we get out of them is honestly surprising. When we started this, I'm really pleasantly surprised just how much specific character you get out of it. It tastes like cherries. It tastes like pineapple. you could probably get away, if you poured it for a friend, saying there was whole pineapples in it, they would not think twice. But
Right.
there's no whole pineapples. There's just this byproduct.
I love it. I feel like we've spoken about it a lot.
Should we get into it?
I think we should. I actually have not had this one. I'm quite excited. Hey, do you mind getting the cherry? Cherry. I was going to ask, while you're sort of pouring this one, a question I've always had for you guys, and this is something I really love, is the smaller format cans, like the short cans. Why did you guys choose to go for the small cans overall?
That was, I mean, getting into the craft beer scene and kind of starting to brew in the UK, tall cans were
not a thing.
Not existent, and actually they were existent, but it's like Tenets and Strongbow and
Stella and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Kind of
Carillon.
big tins, and so
Yeah.
I imagine as these things tend to do, sort of American craft beer trends and the waves, the ripples that it casts out probably reached London by this time. It's been a little while, so I'm sure there's a lot of tall cans there now. But from my perspective, it was just I think a beer only really it starts to warm up. It's the quality is a little questionable after 500 mils or 475 or whatever it is. These it just seemed a bit more manageable, and I think on the horizon were sort of signs that this might be happening. Not to say that I kind of saw this coming from a mile away, but really, in all honesty, it was sort of a kind of choice of perceived quality and preference, I think left field and who else had started to short can by that point. We certainly weren't the first ones, but
Eastbound, Godspeed, kind of your whole area actually. The East End is pretty short can heavy. Burdock, I think that's on.
Again, East End it's a little bit. It's the sort of the East End breweries are almost as a rule a lot younger than the West End ones.
True.
And so maybe sort of the tide had turned by the time the East End breweries popped up here in Toronto. It just they kind of seemed to be the way things were going. So we made a bit of a call.
Love it. It's I think it's one of the I much prefer these. Like you said, like I would rather drink more of less, particularly in the way that I have to drink beer. It's consume a lot, to document a lot, to then promote a lot, and it's easier for me if I've got little smaller guys, So I think I noticed it's got elderberries in it too. So there's like a nice little what's the deal with the elder?
So go ahead.
I was just going to say this is sort of obligatory shout out, obligatory kind of plug for Wellington Made, which is my partner's mother's company.
Cool.
My girlfriend Madison, her parents live on a farm in Wellington County, and for 2 years running now, I've gone and picked some elderberries, and we've used some whole, but by and large, it's again been the elderberry must, the pressings. I think, Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, this was all pressings, elderberry palmist pressings, yeah.
Yeah, we used all the whole elderberries in a different beer.
Thank you, Shelley.
I love that. So what, I think, is okay, stupid elderberry questions. I know, obviously, I would imagine most people don't know much about elderberries. What do they contribute to this type of beer? Is it color? I imagine they're probably not as dark as the cherries. Like, is it color?
No, actually, they're significantly darker than the cherries.
Really?
They're very aggressive. You can use them as like a dye.
Okay, cool.
They're sort of like, if you imagine like a dark cherry or a blueberry with like mixed with the wine grape. They've got some serious funk and like a tannic backbone, but they have that sort of like somewhat low acidity, dark fruit character. It's tough for me to describe it accurately because they are quite unique.
What are they closest to? like a black currant or a
yeah, but less acidic. Yeah,
less
again, I could
acidic?
only do it in really in blends. I'd say like take a black currant and like a very dark raisin, almost like a dried cherry, and blend those flavors. That's sort of the first thing that comes to my mind. After elderberry, which is itself it's an interesting flavor. I encourage people to try it. You can get elderberry juice and extract too. It's used in a lot of natural remedies. They're delicious. They're really really interesting. And they in this beer, we wanted to incorporate them for a couple reasons. One, because they were super local and they're another pressing. But beyond that, it's they do contribute sort of a an unknown layer that integrates very well with the rest of the fruit character, and just kind of enriches it.
Right. That's really cool. I mean, I guess it's like, and kind of makes sense that they do sound like a fruit that might not be something. I don't think I've ever seen like a single fruited elderberry beer really. Like I've seen like Haskap berry, like which I think is also another local thing to this general Quebec Ontario region. But no, I think that's actually super fascinating. This is great. So just to confirm here, so it's got the cherry pomace, the elderberries, the cherry juice, and it does have the remainder of like the pits, because I know the pits can kind of give that almondy, nutty. It still has the pits and stuff in here, right?
Yeah. So again, like or specific to the cherries, the pressings we get are imagine you took a cherry and you squeezed it in like a citrus reamer. You got all of the juice out, and you'd be left with the pit and like basically compressed skin and a very small amount of flesh that you didn't quite get. So that's what we get. So the pits are all in there, and that's where you're exactly right. You get that marzipan characteristic.
Marzipan, that's the word.
It's class. Yeah, or the almonds. Same. It's same thing basically.
Same thing.
Yeah. And that's like a classic component of like a creek, which this is not a creek, but that marzipan character is something that I adore, and I think Max as well. That like when you have a really good cherry beer, it has that sort of nutty character to it that balances the sweet and acid of the cherry.
100%. I really look forward to that element of it. So I was happy to hear that you guys were actually throwing that in. I'd learned about that from, I forgot what it was. Probably some of the barrel-aged beers that kind of look for that. I feel like it's not... No, it was Small Pony. Because he was telling me that they put the cherry pits in to give it that extra element. I feel like it's not... people wouldn't obviously use the real cherry juice. They'd probably typically go for more of the puree. So that obviously does not come with the pits and stuff. I love that. That's super cool. And I know we kind of talked about this even leading up to this beer. Another thing about this I noticed was it's a saison, and I'm not getting, and this is something that I personally appreciate, I'm not getting a lot of the phenols, because one thing that always turned me off saisons, obviously I mean the land of saisons out here, but I never enjoyed them because they just tasted like bubblegum and banana, and it was just not really the type of profile I was looking for. So I always appreciate a saison that has like a really low phenol kind of vibe to it. Do you guys, is there a reason why you guys kind of chose to do that, or does the cherries just hide it?
No, it's our yeast strain. I'm 100% with you. I don't really like a phenolic saison, and the most common saison strain used, maybe it's equal with another strain, but like a dominant saison strain used across North America is very phenol heavy, and I just it's not to my palate, and it's also sort of come to in some ways define saisons locally. So for both of those reasons, we thought we'd try something different. So we sourced a different saison yeast that I had experience with that I really loved. that is not uncommon. We're certainly not the only brewery using this outside of its source, but it's way less common than the two dominant strains.
Love it. I think it's a great choice. It's particularly for like a market where you guys are at. That it doesn't have the same level of what's the word, like people don't like over here. People have always wanted farmhouse because we've been more influenced by Belgium, and then you guys obviously in Ontario more influenced by the UK type of styles traditionally, anyway, like historically. And I feel like there's definitely a palate for that type of stuff here, and I always never enjoyed Quebec beer for the longest time because I felt like they didn't have a lot of variety and it was so much of that type of stuff. So as over time, and I've been trying all sort of different stuff, and I start to realize, oh, there are farmhouse ales and such with that don't taste like that banana and bubblegum, and I always appreciate it when I find them because I still, for better or worse, I guess I still feel like they're in the minority of saisons that are around, unless I'm maybe not saison man, so I might not know, but that's where I want to vibe.
I think the best part about saisons, and this is actually holds true even in France and Belgium, is that it's like, it's become kind of codified as a style, but it's really a loose affiliation of small farmhouse breweries. Like the style has so much variance within it,
Right.
Between color, between what adjunct you use, between how your yeast tastes. Is it a pure culture? Is it a mixed culture? What's your hopping rate? Do you use old hops? Do you use new hops? There are just so much within saison that other beer styles are way more uniform, and I love that. And I'm with you that there's a whole family of saisons that I just don't like, but it is cool that they're there and they are identifiably saison. There's something loose that ties them all together, and that's a very cool concept, and I love that you can cover so many different palettes within this one style, because there are obviously a lot of people who really love phenolic saisons and like ultra dry saisons that are driven by that spice and that like really intense drying characteristic of like a 0.2 Plato beer, and I can still identify as a saison, even if I'm identifying as a saison that I don't like, or like a style of saison I don't like. And I think that's cool. I think it's great.
Yeah, man, it's cool that Max, go for it. Yeah, I'd love to hear.
My perspective, I mean, saisons were always one of my favorite styles because, largely because one of the, I think one of those commonalities that does kind of connect them is a general dryness, that they're on the drier side of things. And so with a nice balance of dryness and assertive yeast character, be that more on the phenolic side or not, to me, they often, it was sort of, I came to them in a big way in terms of pairing with food, found them to be really, really strong food pairing beers. And certainly some of the more sort of subtle ones, things that don't have quite as much of that bubblegum character, which obviously presents a certain challenge when it comes to food pairings. But the sort of dryness, the mouth-watering character was great in the context of trying to sell food and operate a restaurant as well.
Totally. No, that's a good point. On that kind of note, I mean, we sort of alluded to it earlier, where you guys said that you really sort of, shared the same vision for the types of beers that you guys were going to brew. I'd like to hear a little more about that, because I guess you were talking about the sort of three groups, from the lagers to the 99% to the barrel aged stuff. I mean, but you guys do a fantastic IPA that and there was the double IPA version, I believe, Brandon, if I'm not mistaken. The original recipe you made for Notion's Hops on My Sleeve ended up being sort of like a loose base for what was to become the Avling, either the IPA or the double IPA, one of the two.
That was the double IPA. Yeah,
the double.
Yeah,
which is super cool to me. I love that. That's where you created that recipe for that particular occasion, and were able to, because it was a really great recipe, and you're able to take that on. So I feel like you guys are doing. I'd like to just hear where it was coming from, because I still feel that you're doing these like kind of like new world IPAs that are super bright and hoppy and hazy, actually, really. even though it's not straight New England, it's still in that wheelhouse. And you're doing like something like fantastic, like the Magpie, with super kind of new world in the sense it's that real like hoppy lager. What was the vision that you both had for this brewery? Where did you meet in the middle, and kind of where has that taken you in the last year and a half to almost 2 years?
I think sort of when Max and I talked, and one of the things that I brought that day that I think Max was, also thinking of, and likely would have brought up had I not brought it up, was sort of, working hard on technique in order to bring out more specific or singular flavors. And with hops is an easy way to talk about it. Is like I love really hoppy beer that just tastes like fruit punch. It's great. But we were curious about trying to work with hops to bring out a hoppy beer that's like all melon and honeydew, or really lean hard into red fruit like berries or strawberries, and try to achieve those flavors through hops. And maybe a little bit of a less is more, and this is where Magpie sort of falls into a less is more strategy, that if you don't, if you add a little less hops, you might be able to have more specific sort of discrete flavors, which is something that, as a brewer, I find really interesting and rewarding, because you are, it's a bit of a search and a bit of a journey to try to figure out how to do that without, finding penalties in the quality of bitterness you're getting, or maybe you end up with some secondary hop flavors that you don't like.
Right.
It is it's a cool challenge, and it's a real technique driven pursuit. And I think that broadly sort of encapsulates a little bit of how we work, or one of the pillars of our process is to try to do our best to be subtle, and to have a confident but a light touch, in order to let specific ingredients taste as much like themselves as they can. Or if you really hit it out of the park, you find a way to make something taste more like itself. And sometimes that requires some like fun flavor alchemy, in terms of blending two flavors together to try to taste like one. But we really want to let the ingredients shine, and we are really focusing on technique to try to maximize, because there's such high quality ingredients we can get in Ontario. So if we can make them sort of their best selves, then we feel like we've done our job.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of build on that, at least touch on what you were getting at with, in terms of we say we have these buckets, but we've also got the IPA, and we do the double IPA. I think when we first started having a conversation, we knew, or at least I sort of envisioned a core range of Pils, Saison, IPA. Pils, because I think this is one of the big reasons why, or one of the big agreements or sort of alignments that we had originally, and right off the top, was a desire and interest in doing really high quality lagers. And so there was the Pils, there was the Saison, again because of what I just touched on about the food pairing capability, and then the IPA, because really, like, we're a craft brewery, and you got to have an IPA. Sort of, it's the calling card, whether you like it or not. And I think for us, it is not something that we do 7 different versions of. If you look at our menu, there is one IPA maybe 2 if when we do the double IPA, because we got in the hops, or because we had an opportunity to do that, and so we said, okay, well, why not? But it was really, there was purpose behind it. There was a discussion about the ingredients, a discussion about what we want to do. So the IPA that's part of our core range is a really deliberate choice, a really deliberate process around what do we think an IPA, what's our IPA all about, and how can we perfect that, as opposed to iterating a dozen times, 24 times over the course of a year. And then, yeah, with the other beers, to Brandon's point about trying to tease out flavors in a sort of more focused way, with the Brevis Cherry that we just had, the majority of the flavor that you're getting there is from that cherry pomace. We did add cherry juice, but in a small quantity at canning. It was, and I think really the primary element, the primary characteristic that brings to this beer is not to amplify the cherry flavor, but it's cherry in a different form, which adds a layer of complexity, adds a layer of nuance that isn't necessarily identifiable as its own element, but it fills out that picture of cherry and makes it a kind of more intriguing, more full. And it's that kind of, I'd reference it as, or at least I talk about it in culinary terms. It's seasoning, it's a stock, it's sort of building layers of flavor it's not overwhelming, but it's complex and it's deep, it's rich.
I love that. Okay, so that's giving me a bit more context. Are there styles that you guys are like, we don't want to do? Whether it's just curious, and I understand because you've got this ethos, right? And I know, I'm a little more familiar with Brandon's palate and the things that he's done over the years, and I see what you guys have created here, which I imagine has been quite a lot of teamwork here as far as the everything that you guys have put together. I think you have done like a light stout, if I'm not mistaken, like nothing like a big guy or anything. That's been like a 5% or something. No, am I dreaming?
Yeah, no, we did. You were right. Yeah, we did.
Okay.
We have a low alcohol stout. It's like 4.5% Geist. We did do an imperial stout this winter.
Okay.
But not really, not like a pastry stout style. In regards to
Pastries
modern. Yeah, in terms of modern like sweetness level in stout, this would, I think, probably for an imperial stout be considered quite dry.
Gotcha.
Our minds are open, and we try to stay flexible, and like I have my own sort of like I have my own prejudices in with regards to beer styles that I like or don't like.
Yeah.
Everybody does.
Of course.
We try to keep our minds open, and I try to keep my mind open as much as possible to not get caught in a rut like that. I think one thing we do try to stray away from is the like really ultra more is more beer, which is really cool and like building like massive flavor. I find interesting. You just use so many ingredients, and your efficiency on those ingredients drops with the amount you use. And malt right now is not a big deal supply wise, though climate could dramatically change that. Hops are they're a very finite resource, and we in the IPA we use a lot of hops. So obviously we're not like counting grams on that, but we do try to avoid styles that just use so many ingredients that they would the IPA doesn't fit cleanly into our ethos. Like Max said, it's sort of we're a craft brewery, we need to have an IPA, and we're happy to have it. I love drinking that beer. But if we were to make an IPA that was dry hopped at 30 grams a liter, it wouldn't just not fit into our ethos. It would run counter to it, and that's sort of where the line I draw is if we feel as if we're sort of getting only 50% of what we might get out of the hops because we're using so many of them, then we're being for us that's the type of ingredient usage that we sort of don't feel fits with us.
Gotcha. So that makes sense. So then, even if I'm just thinking of like a variety of styles that maybe I haven't seen you guys do, like, would you do something like a barley wine? I can imagine you wouldn't do a smoothie sour. That doesn't feel
I don't think
very,
we're gonna do a
very.
smoothie sour,
No, it doesn't feel very brandedy to me. I'm just trying to think about
No,
the fit.
and like beer stability and beer quality over the long term is really important to us, and I don't think that's a beer you can stabilize realistically.
Even with pasteurization, I think it's yeah iffy. Yeah,
Yeah, it's risky. It's very risky, and we also freshness unfiltered beer is another thing that's important to us, and so pasteurization is sort of
not really part of the MO.
yeah, it's not really on the table
Gotcha.
unless we had some idea that we just were in love with, and the only way to get it to the right level was to pasteurize it. But I would do everything I could to avoid it because I just don't think the heating process is without penalty.
Gotcha.
I mean, I would love to make a barley wine. I really like barley wines. However, they are just not sought after outside of a small group
Very
of
niche.
of aficionados. So who knows? Down the road, these things are open. But you know, we're quite young, and we spend more of our time as like an open living brewery in lockdown than the time we spent before lockdown. We've passed that tipping point a couple months ago. So
Right. Wow. That's
there
crazy.
are certain sort of curveballs or shots in the dark or you know, beers we made for ourselves that maybe we'd love to do in the future. But right now we're pretty focused on beers that really fit our ethos and that we feel will also you know, be well received by our clientele, which is not dominated by like you know, beer like craft beer lovers, like people who are like, you know, embedded in the industry. We have a lot of locals in our neighborhood. That is the core of our clientele is people who live in Leslieville and in Greenwood, Coxwell, and in Riverdale and up on the Danforth. And that is we do have some really like knowledgeable beer people who are regulars, but you know, your neighborhood, your local clientele is the most important people to look after.
Gotcha.
So thus far, we have not had people clamoring for barley wine.
Fair enough. It's not really my cup of tea either, but I feel like the beer nerds are missing out, man. Like, you guys do some like, it's weird with the way that trends have gone. You know, there's trends that are haze and smoothies and pastries and whatever. But there's also, it's come the other way. The pendulum has swung, and I got to admit it got me heavily back into, you know, we all started drinking macro lagers, and you get to the Euro lagers, and then the local stuff, and then ambers, and then porters and stouts and brown ales and Belgians. You do the whole flavor wheel, and you discover everything. Then you come back home to where you started. And like every time I do, you know, me and my brother are sending beer back and forth all the time, and I'm always just get me the Crispies, man. I don't really care that much about much else, and it's got to a point where it's just like it's mostly what I would prefer to drink, and I love that, and I think that's a cool thing about the beer nerdery thing. You know, you go through your little journey and you end up back where you started, and now you appreciate this first thing that was just the thing that you just did. You didn't think about it, but now you're like, oh, it's nuance in this, and even now we just had 2 back-to-backs, so different, and that these are just 2 of your many, you know, many different Crispies. So the beer nerds are missing out. First of all, I was gonna ask more about that. I do like that it's serving the neighborhood. You were saying that. I lost the question. God damn it, it was valuable. But either way, this shit is like, this is killer, man. I am really impressed with this bad boy. I feel like it's probably a little more ramped up even than the pineapple. And when I say this for the audio folks, the cherry saison, yeah, it's definitely more ramped up. It's like you only notice it's a saison in the back end. Like if I was doing this blind, I could probably pick that it's a saison, but it's like subtle in the back end. It's got the yeast just kind of comes through and tickles you at the back, but.
Yeah, so we've made a bunch of different versions of this beer over the last couple of years. It's one of the first 10 beers we made. But we really, the last version we made is sort of after making that and tasting it, it's a very good beer. But we decided that we wanted to sort of lean into the cherry a little more,
Yeah.
lean into the acidity a little more, and try to find a way to kind of, remake it. You know how you've made something for a long time. It's good, but you haven't revisited it as much as maybe we revisited the IPA or the Pilsner, and at a certain amount of time, you realize that it could use a refresh, or you should just come at it with fresh eyes. So we really put a lot of work into planning this batch because the process and the ingredient list and how we processed the ingredients all was quite a departure from previous batches. So
Right.
I'm happy it comes through in your glass.
Yeah, man. It's killer. So what were the other ones? So I've had the pineapple, and I think you guys would, Max, you mentioned before there was a lime version. Is that correct of this beer? I can imagine lime being great.
We did two different, did pineapple and lime, and just straight pineapple, right, Brandon?
Yes, that was the one I had with straight pineapple. Pineapple and lime's a great idea. That's a really cool flavor combo, actually.
It worked really well.
Yeah, that's super unique. No, I love it, man. This is I had a really good fucking segue before. He was saying some stuff, and then I kind of started thinking of other things, and I lost it. And it was a good move onto it. Either way, I wanted to take it to a different sort of direction, but no, this is great. I feel like we've moved on to I feel like I'm getting a bit of an understanding now from drinking the beers and then going through this and understanding exactly where you guys have have been coming from to approach all of this type of stuff. So say if we just quickly touch on the kitchen stuff. I did eat there the first time I was there. The food was exceptional. How have you guys crafted the menu to kind of pair with the beers, or the beers to pair with the food, being that it's also intertwined, like inherently in the ethos of the business as a whole? Or how does that work?
That's the really nice thing about the approach in general, in focusing on local products in both the food and the beer, in focusing on approachability, fundamentals, technique, dry beers, food that plays well in a neighborhood like Leslieville. We actually don't need to think about it that much in terms of coordinating the two departments, at least in designing beers for the food, or vice versa. The ethoses are consistent, and a really beautiful byproduct of that has meant that time and time again, it just there are some pairings that naturally suggest themselves really without too much planning. So it's a nice byproduct of the approach we take.
That's great. And I guess like a lot of these beers, now I'm kind of thinking of it because of that lack of over intensity of the flavors that we were talking about before. They would all kind of lend them. Jesus, got burping tonight. They kind of lend themselves to pretty easily to food. Beers, man. That's how it goes. To food pairing, right? I can imagine drinking. One of the first beers the first beer I think I had was the Pils, which is. Are you still doing that, Pils?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, good. I love that.
That's our constant project. We're brewing next week, and I'm already thinking about it.
Yes, I love that shit. That is fire. But I can imagine all of these beers being super. I mean, this more feel like the cherry tart saison. There's definitely a little more of a dessert kind of beer where I don't know if I would want too many, particularly savory flavors. I kind of just want to soak this up. I could probably complement it nicely with some sort of not overly sugary dessert or something. But all of the other beers, a lot of the IPA, the maybe ones that aren't sort of as sweet or as fruited, or potentially even the beer we're about to have next, would go super well with food. So I imagine that it's a sort of, and even the barrel aged stuff, which we're going to get to also shortly, are also not like in your face. Like they're not like wild, and there's something to be said about that sort of understated approach to the beer that allows you to taste everything, and so you could eat something and then taste that, but still get it's complex enough without kind of like taking over. So I imagine it's kind of that approach to beer was Was that intentional then? That the approach to the beer to be that, or did it just happen to work out that you guys liked a certain sort of way of brewing, being that you're both brewers, and that happened to work with food? Like, how did that come about? Was it intentional or was it, circumstantial?
No, it's definitely intentional. That sort of I think Max is the same way. I think I grew up lucky enough to have parents who were really knowledgeable about wine. So I was introduced to a lot of different wines at a relatively young age, and it took me a while to sort of appreciate it. But the wine is sort of the ultimate food pairing, obviously, or at least the dominant food pairing alcohol. And I think one thing I certainly have learned and continue to learn from wine is how important subtlety and elegance is, and you don't want your wine to be, or your beer to be plain, but you also want it to integrate with the rest of what you're doing, and the food is part of that, and it can't integrate very well if it's very loud and brash.
Yes, great point.
And as I've grown up and sort of sought out wine on my own and had a couple opportunities to try some big time wines, it continues to strike me how much like some of the really sought after wineries or styles or regions, you open a really stellar, spectacular bottle of wine that still speaks softly. And it's not often that you open a really, really beautiful bottle of wine that just like sort of gives you a 1-2, like or a left hook. They are confident and because the wine is, or because the winemaker, I guess, is has a confidence in their drinkers, that the subtleties will be appreciated. They are able to do that.
I love that.
And I think that it just pairs with food. Go ahead.
I was just saying the other thing about wine is you don't really hear of winemakers saying, okay, great, last year's Chardonnay was good, but we're just going to take everything and turn it up to 11, or so and so down the road did a Chardonnay and it was oaked this much, so we're gonna out oak them, or we're gonna try and extract as much possible tannin as we possibly can. It's I think in wine it's about, okay, what are the conditions that we have, and how can we how can we strive to the unattainable goal of the sort of perfect wine in our setting and in our region, and for the grapes that we have, and what it is that we're doing. And I try to sort of stay away from the one of the nice things about beer generally is it more often than not avoids the kind of pretension and haughtiness that can plague wine, but there's definitely a confidence about that, and I Brandon and I often, Brandon in particular, find ourselves talking about these beers in sort of more winemaking terms than you might hear, than beer making terms, and we, I think, as opposed to trying to maximize a style, we've picked our styles and we've picked our base recipes, and then it's just about improving and understanding what it means to us and how we can improve on that idea.
I like that. This is all fascinating to me. The first thing that came to mind, I think I might have talked to you guys about them before, but you guys know the dudes at Rosewood? Yeah. So Will and Ryan are mates of ours too, and those guys approach wine like beer, just like you're saying you approach beer like wine, because they were like, we're doing this Chardonnay, well, VQA says it has to be just oak, well, fuck that, we're going to put it in stainless, we're going to put it in there, we're going to do this, and they were the closest ones to kind of what you were just saying, Max, where they were like, not ramping it up in the way that beer, well, oh, you're a double dry, oh, you're triple dry hop that, don't want, like, it's not like that, but not also not abide by the rules in an avant-garde kind of way and just create like a more interesting product that may not be by these traditional style guidelines, which is much more frowned upon in wine than it is in beer, which is seem to be pretty open these days. But it's just really interesting to hear that kind of perspective in contrast with someone like Rosewood, who are doing basically the same type of thing, just flipped around. I really enjoy that. It's so cool.
Yeah, and I mean, an
Yeah.
interesting. I was just
Go
going
ahead.
to say a benefit or a luxury that we have in the beer world is, from the drinker's perspective, a real willingness to kind of be interested and tolerate flexibility of style and experimentation. And we look to in other ways to experiment. It's not necessarily in the sort of ingredient or volume type of experiments that are common in brewing right now, but
Yeah.
it's sort of a luxury that is nice to have in brewing. That is, you'll find a lot more pushback in the wine world, and how they've been able to balance that experimentation while still putting out some really like delicately crafted wines it's impressive.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think not to clarify that there is a huge amount of room to be very creative, while still being driven by allowing the ingredients to express themselves. So I think Rosewood represents that really well. You're totally right. They are, iconoclastic sometimes with these wines and with the BQA, and it's awesome. I love their sort of their verve and their commitment to experimentation. But the wines still come out tasting like those grapes. They are just taken in really intriguing ways. The one that comes to my mind is Cool Hands, their Sauvignon Blanc. It was one of the most intriguing and surprising expressions of that grape that I've really ever had. I was sort of not expecting anything close to it, but in the end, it is really, you can identify the grape. You can see how they've just pushed it in this really intriguing direction through, process and time and commitment to their ideals. And it does taste like itself. It's just taken in a really cool new direction.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I don't know if we want to. I don't want to get into it too deep because I know we're not drinking it tonight. But the Skywood, I think it's a Cab Franc IPA. That if I was told, Buffy said, don't drink it for 2 or 3 weeks, no problem. Brandon will tell me when I'm allowed to do it. She told me. She's Brandon will tell me. I don't know if we want to just briefly touch on that before we jump into the next one. But I was just going to ask you guys anyway, even after the call. I was like, yo, tell me about that a little bit more. I mean, who did you work with for the skins, and what's the deal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Skyward is our sort of Ontario IPA. We were sort of trying to figure out a way to make. We make an Ontario Pale Ale, Calm C, which is like a really, it's our best effort to really do justice to the hops that are grown up at Highland by, at Highland Hop Yard. Shouts out to Will and Steve and Maggie. We realistically don't have enough of a supply of hops to make Calm C all year round and make Fallow Year all year round, and also make an IPA, which would dominate the hop usage. So we were looking for a way to make an Ontario IPA without burning through our year supply. And
Gotcha.
when it's gone, it's gone. And that's an interesting thing we like. With some of our sourcing is that we've sort of gotten used to in sort of the rich parts of the world that you'll have an ingredient all year long no matter what, because it can always be imported from somewhere. But when you're working with small farms, when you're working with local farms, when the harvest is gone, the harvest is gone. And it's an intriguing way to work. It's not something I had experienced in brewing, because brewing is usually exactly like other food processes, you can always call somebody and get your hops in. But we're good in equivalent hopping. But long story short, we decided that we would try to blend a couple styles, and we get red wineskins from Rosewood
Nice.
the last couple of years, and we hope to do that many years in the future to make Sang-Froid, which is our barrel-aged blend that goes on to red wineskins. And we actually have we have another batch of Sang-Froid that's on the skins right now. So we decided to make a Ontario IPA with Cab Franc skins last year. Now this year we ended up using Cab Sauv skins for Sang-Froid, which will come out closer to the fall. But we reserve some of those skins. We get some extra, and we use them in Skyward. So this is a beer that is, again, it's used
second use.
This, like the Brevis, yeah, well, exactly, yeah. So this, like the Brevis, uses the barley that was grown on Lincoln Pasture, which is our pork supplier. So that barley that was malted at Barn Owl out in Belleville, correct?
I think that, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, the Linton barley goes to get malted at Barn Owl, another small producer that's trying to bring some of these beer ingredients to the province. We make a beer with that malt that was grown for us by our pig farmer. We use the second use skins from Rosewood. We use hops from Highland Hop Farms, which is up near Collingwood in Meaford, and sort of tying all those things together. So it's one of the beers, sort of like Carillon, that ties together so many different sort of initiatives we're pursuing to create a beer that we're really proud of. It's a really interesting melding of flavors, sort of. There's a really nice order of events in that beer where you can taste each set of ingredients one by one. Instead of them all kind of coalescing into a single flavor, you can sort of, if you pay attention, wait for each one to show up and then disappear and make way for the next one.
I love it. I think you just did a really great segue right into to the next one. I'm going to go grab it because I also need to use the washroom. I'll be back in like 30 seconds. Do you guys want to just explain the beer? I'm going to take this headphone plug out so I can hear it whilst I'm gone. But yeah, do you want to just really quickly just touch on what that what the beer is, what it's about? Because it's a super interesting one, and it also needed to be can conditioned for a little bit as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, go for it. Back in a sec.
So the next beer we're drinking is called Carillon, which is French for the bell ringer at a church. The idea being this is sort of a beer that was defined by our rooftop garden. So we, our gardeners, Mish and Lindsay, grew an enormous amount of pineapple sage, which is a really amazing herb that looks like sage and tastes like pineapple. It's one of the herbs I've been most sort of taken aback by when I was introduced to it because of how, clearly it smelled of pineapple, not kind of like pineapple, like actual pineapple. So we had it grown, or we asked them to grow it on the roof, and we spent a whole day harvesting it. Max and I, and Micheline, and Lindsay, and Tenet, and Taylor, our brewer, we all harvested all morning, and we chopped all afternoon. And all of that pineapple sage was stored immediately in raw honey from Rosewood. So the honey became infused with all of the flavors of the pineapple sage. And sort of when it was mature, we used it in a pretty clean sort of wheat and oat forward saison. And this beer's can conditioned. We allow it to, this year we allowed it to can condition for 3 months because it's a beer that time really is its friend. And it's really come together into a very rich experience. It's got a ton sort of those wildflower notes on the nose. And it's just a little bit tart and a little bit sweet on the palate. And it's got this texture and this long tail of sort of chewy grain and like cookie characteristic that comes from the honey. It's very intriguing. It's a very, very dry beer mathematically, but the honey brings this like impossible to recreate sweetness or perceived sweetness to it, and a texture that we're in love with the texture that rosewood honey gives this beer.
That's so cool. So it's rosewood honey and the pineapple stage from the rooftop, and the herbs are put into the honey. That's
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a post on Instagram today that shows some really great photos of that.
So I'm gonna
from
check
our processing in the fall.
Okay. Okay. Where the hell did that idea come from? Because that is extraordinarily unique. Like putting a herb in honey and then let that bad boy sit, and I guess infusing that honey. Is that okay?
It's sort of classic. It's classic harvest dilemmas. The pineapple sage was ready. The frost was coming.
Had to do something.
We had to do something with it, and we didn't have the tank space. It was done. The frost came early. The first year we did this, and so we bumped around a couple of ideas of how best to use it. You can dry it. You could preserve it in acid. You could ferment it. But the honey really stood out as like a very complementary flavor. An opportunity to work with Rosewood, who we had just worked with for the first time for Saint Foy, and sort of a really happy happy challenge turned into a really great result.
So the base of this beer, even just smelling it, like it kind of smells like farmhouse-y.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it like Ontario wheat and oats? I mean, I guess that doesn't tell me anything specifically about the style, but like, is it a farmhouse base? I mean, looking at it's like a nice bright straw yellow color, nice and opaque, wicked big head. Which obviously
you could call this
a saison type.
You could call this a saison. Yeah, definitely, or a farmhouse beer. That is what it is. There is like there's pretty decent tradition in Belgium of honey beers. That's where the Bière de Miel comes from.
Okay.
There's a few large saison breweries that make honey beers once a year, a couple times a year. So that's sort of what it's inspired by.
Is this different? I've had this before, so I was just checking if I had had it. How different? I imagine because of the nature of the can conditioning and that whole process, it would be quite different batch to batch. I don't recall it being maybe this opaque. I mean, it might have been a little bit since I had the last one. But, no. Like, is there anything... Like, is this the same as the last one? Does it look and taste and feel the same? Or is there any sort of, like, anything...
It's a little different.
Okay.
Yeah, we changed the process a little bit. Critically, the pineapple sage... Max can speak more on this, but the soil used on the roof is improving year on year, and that's a concerted effort from our gardeners to rotate crops in order to put nutrients into the soil, not just take them out. So the pineapple sage we got out of the beds this year, or out of the garden this year, was much punchier, so that certainly factors into it. And then there's not a lot of signposts or guidelines for making this beer last year. Yeah. So we learned a lot from what we did and how it tasted and how it developed over time with the cans we saved. And we sort of took those lessons and melded them with everything we learned over the year of brewing, how to sort of maximize the quality out of our brewhouse and cellar, and tried to apply those this year. So the acidity is a little lower, the honey character comes out a little more, The malt bill is
Yeah.
just a little bit different to try to support that really interesting sort of honey cracker character that the honey gave. Um, sort of, iterative, trying to improve it every time.
Yeah. I feel like it's
It's a
yeah. Add something, please. Yeah, talk to us, Max.
Well, I was just going to say it's a funny one because
Yeah.
it is a sort of harvest beer in the truest sense that we can do, being in the middle of a city. But
Right.
it's a beer that we can only do once a year because we've only got one harvest of pineapple sage from the roof, and we might be able to source it elsewhere. But I think there's something um, kind of intriguing about looking into what that means for us to only do it once a year, and how our crop of pineapple sage changes from year over year. As Brandon touched on, I mean, our soil has changed quite a bit on the roof. Mostly it's improved, and the sort of the yields have gone up, and through the hard work of the gardeners, we've really started to kind of understand what works well up there. And so um, it it is something that this batch is certainly something I really look forward to this year, given how the first one turned out. And I think it is being can conditioned and having these really unique kind of annual elements that are specific to the year, specific to just this batch. This will continue to change, and I'm really, it's been exciting to be able to see this come together. But I'm also excited to see where this is going to head, where this is going to go in the next couple months as well.
It's so cool. Like I didn't like. It's very interesting reading the ingredients, and you see what's in. I'm like, oh, cool, pineapple sage. I've kind of heard of that before, and that sounds fascinating. But when you actually really like drill down, and you're taking your own sage and then putting it in local Niagara honey, and then letting that sit, and then like that is so insanely creative and innovative. I genuinely like, it makes me love this beer even more. Like I remembered always like liking it and thinking it was cool. I feel like this is like exceptional. This has been like a really great lineup of beers tonight, by the way, and it's like paving the way perfectly with this sort of like coming to that kind of I don't describe it like chewier mouthfeel that's going to lead nicely into the barrel stuff. But are you guys looking to do, or do you have any other plans, or have you done that maybe I'm not familiar with, like other beers in this sort of vein, as far as like that level of like kind of crazy creativity? To me, that's like the definition of that. Just obviously not in the trendy stuff where you just like chucking shit in beer, but using these things and taking them in that way, and then using that to infuse and then inspire a whole thing, is something that's I really don't think is super common. I'd love to hear if you have any other sort of things that you've either done or that you're working on that you can talk about that utilizing both your own, literally homegrown, like within the space ingredients, alongside other local ingredients, like in that same way. That's sort of that people would be like, wow, like that is really something that they really should come and get their hands on.
I think actually the next beer we're going to drink is the other example we have currently of it, which is Orpheus, the marigold beer, which has a really cool and interesting story, and some really cool crossover between how the marigolds help the garden versus how they help the beer. We have a couple other projects we're slowly working on, but beers like this are like a ton of work creatively. So we're like slowly but surely working on more, but we also have to keep the rest of our beers on the shelf. So and we have to improve them every time. So we put a lot of work into the Pilsner, and there's a lot of like creative technique that goes into improving that beer that doesn't really ever show up on the sort of messaging about the beer, because it's like sort of technical and boring. But we're working to create more beers like this. find ways to be innovative with ingredients. How do we marry ingredients together? How do we transform ingredients? And these are all things that really are inspired by kitchens. This is the kind of thing that like an innovative kitchen does, where they, find a way to transform an ingredient in a way you are surprised by, and that sort of little spark of magic is what makes a really special dish special. So we're working on that. I think Orpheus is where Carillon was year one's sort of really great expression of our creative efforts with like innovative use of ingredients. Orpheus is year two.
Gotcha. Okay.
Year three yet to come.
Yet to come. I want to, just before we get into Orpheus, I do want to talk about the barrel program kind of leading into it, but you kind of sparked an idea. I mean, looking at you two as, I imagine that, the two creative minds for the most part, aside from obviously now you've got a couple other people in the brewing team who are contributing and doing fantastic beers. Brandon, with your history, particularly in that, that just that knowledge and depth of knowledge in that traditional sense, and you really understand what, the intricate details of that side of it. And then Max, your kitchen stuff, and this is where I think this is interesting, kind of what you're just saying now, Brandon, that a lot of you're treating these beers in the same way that you would in a kitchen and approaching the same way. And then obviously, Max, you've worked in some places, Joe, people who don't know, Joe Beef and Liverpool House are some of the best restaurants in Montreal that are unfortunately not even doing takeout, which I do respect. They've had to just be like, one good thing, well, nothing's ever really that good, but one positive thing that's come out of the current situation is that restaurants that, we make a real strong point once, sometimes twice a week, always make sure we're trying to support a local restaurant at the very least and order something and not cheap out. And, because obviously our expenses are less because we're not traveling like we used to. So if we invest that back in locally and try and order from somewhere that now many restaurants that wouldn't deliver here before, like we're right in the city in Milan here, but, a lot of places are delivering here now. So we're trying, and one thing we looked at was, Joe Beef, of course, and, their whole series of restaurants that they chose not to. But, like with that knowledge and that sort of history, both in Europe and here from your side, Max, and then obviously being a brewer in multiple, continents really, and, you have that knowledge, so it's not like you're just the owner with the money and like, hey, Brandon, make an IPA. Like, you understand it, and you also understand flavors, and you understand how that works. How do you guys, maybe just give some? I'd love to hear some examples of how you guys have sort of been able to utilize and leverage both of your experience and knowledge that you've both picked up over the years to be able to come together and create something that you're both super happy with, and maybe you might not have been able to do individually, and just how that synergy really works, because I imagine that's really at the heart of the products that you guys are producing, beer wise at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, as I touched on before, I think I try to be, as much as I can be, more of a kind of conduit between the garden and the brewery and the kitchen, and save for a few elements that are just kind of, personal favorites and things that I just, it would kind of break my heart not to have at your own restaurant and brewery. I don't think there's too many times when I've sort of have said, this is the, I want to make this kind of beer, or this has got to be in the menu. It's sort of, I think I hope has been a bit more of a case of bringing an idea, bringing a kind of concept that is maybe informed by my culinary background, or an understanding of being able to spend some time in the garden and seeing what's coming up, and bringing that to Brandon and saying, well, what about this? And often, it doesn't necessarily come together right in that moment, but it sort of will percolate for some time, and a recipe will come up, some weeks later, and it doesn't, we there's not a whole lot of back and forth. I sort of have tried to not, as I say, be too involved in the sort of minutia of recipe development, but where it does come into play, or at least where I kind of do get involved, is sort of maybe planting the seed of hey, let's try grain from a pig farmer like that. I think that's the sort of where I start to get involved in the process, and then Brandon has the unenviable job of trying to make that into a delicious and reasonable beer. But it tends to be, at least from my perspective, pretty easy. We've got a good alignment in tastes, and when you're focused on mostly on quality and sort of intriguing subtlety, your focus is pretty narrow, and your understanding of what success is it's hard to reach, but it's easy to define, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think unenviable is not the right word. I think a lot of people would envy being able to make lagers and being able to can condition something for 3 months. Yeah, I think sort of creatively, sort of what has worked really well is sort of Max tends to sort of suggest and set the destination, but not necessarily the path. And in doing so, that allows us the sort of flexibility and freedom in the brewery to use our creative skills to find the path, which is much better on a creative process than trying to decide ahead of time exactly step A to B to C. Becomes much too structured. So
right.
That has worked very well for us so far, and we've had a couple moments, like one moment I can think of where we sort of had to sit down and figure out the right path forward. Is we've got a beer coming out in a couple months called Lavender that is made with foraged sumac, and we were put in touch with a forager who does a really great job, and is really sort of encyclopedic knowledge of native forageable plants in Ontario, and Max was really excited to work with him. I was as well. I just wasn't sure where we could do it, and we had a beer that was part of our mixed fermentation program that was tasting really good, but we weren't exactly sure how best to like where it slotted into the rest of our beers. It sort of sat in between the different styles we make, and we were able to sit down and figure out the best path forward for that beer based on tasting it was to lean into one of its characteristics. It's like really citric acidity versus like a lactic or like a more like aggressive vinegary acidity. It had this really beautiful citric character to it, and we decided that in order to sort of build on that and to fortify that, to use a kitchen term, we ended up getting more than a dozen bushels of staghorn sumac which the forager Nick Barkis brought in for us, and we were able to sort of put our minds together to identify, the part of the beer that that could become the focus, and that would give it enough of an identity to fit it cleanly into the rest of our mixed fermentation program, and figure out how to make that sing.
What is sumac?
Sumac is like it's an endemic tree to a lot of Europe and now North America. You'll see it everywhere. The moment somebody points it out to you, you'll see it everywhere. It's a sort of a wide but not particularly tall, low tree. it creates these sort of almost circular-based pyramid collections of little florets, and they have a really, again, a citric-forward, almost like pink lemonade characteristic to them. You can cook with them. They're a critical part of harissa and za'atar. They're really common in Middle Eastern cooking. They're also used in Native American cuisine, indigenous Canadian cuisine. And you can make like a lemonade straight from the tree from these little florets. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a nice and interesting example of where foraging is has to push hard to come back, because there's a different type of sumac that exists that is poisonous, and it is entirely different species. It is like unrelated to Staghorn sumac, but in terms of foraging, people are worried about identifying it, where it's that type of sumac doesn't even grow here.
Gotcha.
So it's just not something we have to worry about. People do sumac and they think of the wrong plant. Meanwhile, though, they'll eat harissa or go eat za'atar and not think twice. And there's often sumac in both of those things. It's just a very it's not a very well known ingredient, and we're very excited to have used it.
That's great. I've definitely heard of it. I don't think I've ever seen it, which is cool. I just noticed my camera battery is about to die, so I wanted to take the thumbnail for YouTube before that. Then it will change to my webcam. I'm just going to take a screenshot of us. Do you want to maybe hold up a couple cans? See if we can get that just now, and then we'll keep this going. There we go. Oh, look, they got 3 of them. I love it. Oh, yeah, get them all. Get them all. If I didn't have to hold the damn mouse, I'd get all 4. There we go. Ready?
Oh, no.
I can do it again.
I'm going with 3.
Hang on, wait.
I'm going with 3.
Yeah, no, Max, you had your eye closed. We can't do that to you, mate. I would never do that to you. That would be rude. Okay, wait, let me go. There's a little button. All right.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Ready? Oh, that is stunning. That is gorgeous. That is bloody gorgeous. Look at that. Thank you, boys. Just want to make sure we get that in. So, there's 2 things I kind of wanted to also get into, which kind of is a bit of a segue as we move into the next beer shortly. One of the things is barrel aging, and one of them is to really get deeper into the rooftop garden. So I think we maybe could talk about the barrel aging as we move into the next beer, and then maybe when we're drinking that, we can talk about the garden, exactly what you have up there and stuff. So your barrel program, when I came through, I feel like I'm pretty sure it was February last year. We hung out for the night, Brandon, and you gave, there was a bunch of us out there. We all, you really showed us exactly what you guys had going on and what you were working with, the different type of barrels. Did you guys maybe want to speak about just how the barrel program started, what you intend to do with it, what kind of barrels you have, the barrel-aged beers that you've released thus far? I know there was 4 plus Orpheus and then the other one, so I guess 6 so far.
Mm-hmm.
They're about to have. So yeah, maybe just touch on that.
Yeah. So we decided to start a barrel program immediately. Because the style of barrel beers we wanted to make take a lot of time. So the longer you wait to start, the longer you have to wait to have beer.
Right.
So we were confident that we could produce some good blending stock right away, and with a little luck, we could produce something better than blending stock, which is what ended up happening, which was part planning and part luck. So we got 12 French oak puncheons in before we opened, and our friends at Indie Ale House very graciously stored them for us for a little while, or more than a little while, because we kept getting delayed in our build. So a puncheon is used more widely in beer now than it used to be, but where a normal barrel or a barrique is just over 200 liters, a puncheon's 500 liters, so it's almost 2.5 times as big. They're very large. So we have a 4-stack. We have 3 4-stacks that mix our 12. Each 4-stack is 2,000 liters. So the advantage of puncheons for us is we're not really searching for a strong oak character from any of these beers. There is oak integrated into the characteristics of the beer, but we don't want to be defined by that. And the bigger the barrel, the less oak extraction you get, because the surface area to volume ratio changes. Further on that is that like the exterior of a barrel allows oxygen in, and from the same reason, the bigger volume versus surface area, you will have lower acidity, which is another thing we're searching for. We didn't want to make beer that was defined by its oak, and we didn't want to make beer that was defined by acid. We wanted both of those things to be integrated into a whole. So we brought all these puncheons in, and actually the very first 2 beers we made ended up in those barrels for a couple reasons. One, some of the things you want in a long-aged sour beer, the raw product, the wort, you make it very differently than you would make a Pilsner, for example. And it has a bit more ability to sort of evolve over time, and the wort going in can be of many different styles. So your first 2 brews on a brew house are always challenging. And we sort of leaned into knowing they would be challenging and designed beers that would be able to come out the other side of that maybe long process, maybe that laborious process, and still be the right type of raw product to end up as a really high quality beer. So we put the first 4,000 liters of beer we made went into these French oak puncheons, and portions of those became spinning yarn, and became, which is our straight barrel blend, the sort of definition of what our barrel program tastes like. Portions became Sang-Froid, which is our blend that goes on to Cab Franc and now Cab Sauvskins with rosewood honey. Some became Amarelle, which is our cherry blend. And they all seeded the rest of our barrel program because the barrels are alive. And, the new beer that goes in the barrels is inoculated by the residual beer left in the puncheons and that which is soaked into the walls of the wood. So, after this many turns that we've had, which is coming up 4 on some of the barrels, the walls are alive, and they have taken on, each puncheon has taken on its own identity. It produces marginally different beer, and that gives us some really intriguing barrel blending opportunities.
Right. I love that. The walls are alive. You got I got a few different episode names from some of the stuff you guys have been saying. This is great. I love it. No. Okay. So there's the 12 barrels, and they are the neutral oak. So is it the same base in every single one of the barrel aged beers, or are they are quite different, I imagine, right?
They're not. If you looked at the recipes, you would not see dramatic differences. There's a couple things we do. We try to put a couple different styles of beers, or a couple different critical ingredients go into different puncheons, because they result in sort of different flavors down the road, and we want to end up with we want difference at the end, because we want to be able to blend different flavors to become more than the sum of their parts.
Gotcha.
So we can't just chuck all the ingredients into a single beer and make only that, because they won't develop in the same way. We'd rather separate those ingredients and allow those beers to diverge over time, and then blend them back together to taste. Which sometimes is sort of half of this barrel, half of that barrel, a quarter fresh beer, and all of that barrel. It changes every time. So they are never all the same. Over time, one thing that's consistent is that they have a higher hopping rate, because the bacteria in our blends will take over given the opportunity. So we continue to kind of fight them back with higher bitterness. But other than that, they're fairly similar. They diverge by 10 or 15%, but that's enough to make a very different product after the course of 3 to 9 months.
Interesting. Okay, I feel like should we move into one, even if we haven't completely finished this bad boy? I definitely want to hear. I mean, we'll start with Orpheus, I imagine.
Yeah, let's start with Orpheus.
Okay.
Yeah. I gotta grab them 1 second.
All right, I'm just gonna hop off for a second.
Yeah, no probs. I'll hold it down. Yeah, this is phenomenal, by the way. I swear I had it early on and it did not look like this. This is like really, it's cool to see the iterations of it all. And the beer we're about, oh, could you grab the bottle back for Orpheus in the fridge, in the big fridge? Orpheus, it's a bottle next to the thing. Thank you so much. So the first barrel aged stuff came, I think it was late last year, and there were 4. That was what Brandon was talking about. The first barrel aged beers, Max, they came. It was late last year, wasn't it? Maybe like fall sometime for the first batches.
Yeah. We're definitely we like to give these things the time that they need, and so we definitely didn't rush them. First ones came out late last year. Sort of definitely in the second half of last year. So we were really pleased with how they turned out. It, from my perspective, or at least what it is that kind of excites me about these, is they're great opportunities to fold in some of those ingredients that might be a little bit more difficult to work with in a clean beer, or definitely in a lager. So with the complexity and with the sort of time, all those hard edges get sort of softened, and some more interesting grains, or some interesting products, we sort of fold them in, and with time, flavors meld together really beautifully, and we've ended up with some truly unique products, I think.
Yeah, man. Oh, I love it. I love the labels too. All of the barrel aged, like all the barrel beers, kind of have something sort of similar to like this, like just sort of white labels with these little cool designs that all stand out. I really enjoy them. Now this one, 6.5%. It has orange wine skins and marigolds, which is super dope. I'd love to hear about the orange wine. Is that here we go. That's from Trail Estates.
Mm-hmm. Funny enough, good timing. We just Taylor just went to Trail Estate today to pick up the orange wine skins for this year's Orpheus.
I love it.
So
this color, man, that's great timing. This color looks like peach juice or something. It is insane.
Yeah, this color is actually for me the most special part of this beer.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
The blend of this beer was very pale going on to the orange wine skins, and it was just as pale coming off. We did not get almost any color from those skins, which is not surprising. So, before we added the marigolds to this beer, it was like straw. Okay. So 100% of this color comes from the flowers.
Can you explain to people who don't know what marigolds are, like myself, exactly what? I know there's a Nirvana song called Marigold. I think that's where I first heard of it. Yeah, what's the What's the deal with those bad boys? Are they known for culinary use, or are they just some pretty thing that people grow?
Yeah, marigolds are a really, really interesting flower. They do have a rich culinary history,
I have to Google it while you're talking.
especially in the sort of Caucasus region. So, like Georgia and Azerbaijan, that area, like sort of to the southwest of Russia.
Ooh, okay.
They're used in soups and stews, and they have this really famous citrus and pepper characteristic. They're known in some places as like a substitute for saffron. They're also really well known as a companion plant in the garden, which they are really heavy, really great pollinators. But on top of that, they do a good job drawing pests away from the rest of your plants. So, sort of in the way that the three sisters are planted together in order to synergize and help each other grow, marigolds are sort of that sort of holistic farming concept that if you can plant them intermittently amongst your other crops, they will help everything thrive.
Interesting.
And they're also a really beautiful flower. They have there's a couple different types of marigolds, but yeah, those are the ones we use. Those are French marigolds.
The French marigolds, yes, I saw that.
Fiery red and that yellow tips, but that red you're seeing there is the color of this beer.
It looks like
that's
peach
what turned
juice.
Out.
Oh my god!
It does look like peach juice. I think, yeah.
So I feel like I don't know. Maybe it's just always different when I'm talking to the people who made the beer. It's like I have a completely different experience drinking it, and I feel like I'm identifying flavors and stuff that maybe I didn't get before. So I'd love to talk through this because I feel like this is extremely complex. Okay. I just noticed this shit now. So the beer is peach juice. The top of it is this there's like this red just on the top. Is that a thing?
Yeah,
or am
I see. Yeah, exactly.
What the fuck is that? That is crazy.
That's so this beer doesn't have any foam retention, and I think it's because I'm quite confident it's because the red you're seeing at the top are oils from the flowers.
Oh, that's so cool, man. I love it. Yo, this is fascinating. Sorry, I'm learning about this stuff, and we've been getting into houseplants and shit since everything went to went to what it is. So like I'm much more interested in this. So this nose is like it's I don't even know if I can describe it. Could you guys maybe talk me through this tasting? Because I feel like this is the stuff that you guys you've thought through every element of this beer with from the nose to the visual to all the different complex tasting notes, and I feel like it's worthwhile just talking folks through like how great this stuff is. So this nose, I'm getting. I don't even know what that is. I don't think I can identify it.
It should be that kind of. Brandon talked about that kind of marriage of citrus and pepper, and that to me that's what kind of
again pepper.
Really
You're right.
Is the hallmark of the nose of Orpheus.
Okay, citrus and pepper. All right.
Yeah, and those are sort of the high notes, and then the sort of baseline supporting that is the a combination of the blend that we tailored for this beer and the wine skins, which bring that sort of that white wine character that has been allowed to take on some extra oxidative qualities and some tannic qualities from the orange wine. So Trail has skin contact for this wine that they make, which is orange. The skin contact is really long. It's very long. So there's a ton coming out of the skins that is sort of seasoning the wine, and that's what seasons this beer as well.
It's just
so our goal.
Yeah, keep going.
Our goal in this was to where we're like sang-froid is sort of taking off Oh, Vinny.
There he is. Love a bit of Doug's on you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Where Sangfa is sort of inspired by red wines and would be our would sit in our, if we were going to do like a tasting across everything we do, this would be our red wine. We wanted to make a beer wine hybrid or a beer on wineskins that sort of sat in the orange wine category, and obviously orange wineskins helps with that, but that's not really enough. Because there's so much going on in orange wine that sort of in like a really good orange wine that defines it. There's like an oxidative character. There is a really strong citrus character. There are some phenolics. There's tannic backbone.
Yes.
And then there's this like really beautiful salinity, and these are sort of the elements we were trying to figure out a way to recreate, with our own toolbox. The citric acidity was sort of the easy part because the wineskins will certainly do that. But the rest of it was a bit of a challenge. But we had a really interesting set of barrels that had this sort of Amaro characteristic that somewhat that like phenolic and like intriguing orange peel character, and those became the core of the blend. And the marigolds started really early as sort of the keystone of it all, because they brought the pepperiness, they brought the color, and they brought the citrus, the actual other, like not the acidity, the actual flavor of orange and citrus fruits. So we grew marigolds for the whole year, and this was a huge challenge for our whole gardening team, because marigolds are honestly mind-blowing. They will keep creating flowers over and over and over and over again if you don't allow them to go to seed. So these marigolds were picked weekly, daily, over a whole season when they were ready, because the moment they go to seed, it's over. But if you keep picking the flower at the right time, they keep recreating a flower. So on the day we harvested this, and this was like hours and hours of harvesting, picking every flower and separating it from its little stem. By the time we finished, there was the start of more marigolds on the plants. Wow. Same day.
They're vicious, eh?
They were already regrowing. We took every single one off, and we like went back through to double check. It was all green, and then we processed for like 3.5 hours, and we looked up, and there was orange, just starting all over. Unbelievable, really unbelievable.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it's a really cool plant. So it was really a whole growing season project, and it is a harvest beer, but I think it's important to point out that it didn't, like, even though the harvest day was a really big day, it is really only a portion of the work that went into growing this crop that defines this beer. So yeah, anyways, we're just trying to marry all these different things to create the things you see in some of the orange wines we really like.
In what I was going to say is similar to adding a small amount of cherry juice to the Brevis cherry in order to fill out the kind of picture of cherry, that cherry flavor. Brandon mentioned, the flowers have been harvested throughout the season, and those, at the beginning of the season to when we brewed the beer, when the marigolds went into the beer, was several months. So, we had all this whole backlog of dried flowers, but we also wanted to incorporate fresh flowers because, we had the understanding that as the flowers were dried, they were going to, that was going to tease out a different, or at least sort of emphasize a different characteristic. And so, again, it was that idea of kind of stacking flavors one on top of another. And similar to the grain from the pig farmer. It's sort of looking at a product, in this case the marigolds, which have a benefit to the farming or the gardening process. I mean, I don't think marigolds are totally feasible on a sort of large scale farming operation, but certainly for sort of backyard gardens and larger, sort of market gardens, they're excellent pest management and pollinator flowers. And so looking at beneficial practices and finding opportunities to create a really unique, flavorful product out of those products, or out of those inputs that are there to benefit the cycle as a whole, is really exciting to me.
I love that. When you say pest management, I'm just curious. What do they actually do to stop the pests?
It's a good question. By and large, the pest management. So you get, in terms of agriculture, you've got soil pests, and you've got pests above soil, for lack of a better term. Watch out, Vinny. And marigolds, it's actually in the roots. There's a species of soil pests called nematodes that can be quite damaging to the root structure of plants. And marigold roots, I think it's just they just emit a chemical, emit a toxin that repels these nematodes. And so it's the best application is just to kind of dot them throughout your garden, and which is nice, because as you're sort of walking through these beautiful pops of deep green leaves and these vibrant orange and red flowers.
I love it. I feel like because now we know we're trapped for this summer, so we're like, all right, like last summer we casually went in on plants, and now Tiff has kind of turned this place into a bit of a, you can't really see it right here, but like I'm looking at jungle type stuff. And on the belt, we're in a inner city apartment, like 18th floor type of thing. So we're like, we only got a little bit of a balcony space, but we've bought little like shelves now to put plants on, and got a few little planters and stuff. So you've got me super interested. Like, yeah, I was growing last summer, I was growing like just herbs. Like, obviously I know nothing about this stuff, but like basil and mint and thyme and stuff, like, but we were using it, and it was the coolest feeling in the world to be like, oh, we're making some pasta with some local sauce here, that the Italians that have been here for generations, and they make this sauce for like $10. Like, hell yeah. So you get that, go pick your fresh basil in the thing. It's beautiful. So I'm like, we got this little box that we want to maybe put some flowers in it. I didn't know marigolds look like that. Like, that's crazy. And if they have an additional purpose of a pest management, that's dope. Can they, this is not plants and other shit podcast, but I am curious, can they be used for stuff? Like, can you like pluck some marigold leaves and use them for something, or is it not that kind of party? It's like they're just pretty and...
No, absolutely.
They absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How would you use it?
Brandon, you can pull the flowers, and the petals, like nasturtiums, are great in salads. They've got that peppery character, particularly.
Oh, like the edible flowers.
Yeah, exactly. Or the sort of classic application is in stews. So it's sort of a mountain saffron. It has used in soups and stews to impart flavor and color, particularly when dried.
I'm so sold. Look up marigolds, French marigold. So sick. I was telling Tiff because I feel like she'd be into it. I'm just so fascinated by this. Like, I've had this beer before. That's why I'm not taking the photo of it. And I'm like, I feel like I didn't notice this like little red tinge on the top. I feel like I'm getting these nuances of it. Probably maybe I'm drinking it slower and talking to you guys and really like soaking up every element of it. I'm appreciating it on a whole other level now. It's just so fascinating. It's just such an interesting thing. I feel like it's just not something that's, super common. You don't really hear of it too much, that, people are putting flowers in beers in this real proactive way it's unique, that brings so many elements to it, from the pepperiness to multiple color, visual aspects of it. And it's it's fascinating to me. I just don't really see it too much, and I'm really appreciating this stuff. Um, your
Today,
yeah, go on, man.
I was just like today. It's sort of Brandon mentioned we just picked up the skins for the next version, and that is sort of an exciting day for me because the way in which Carillon adapted and changed and evolved and improved from one year to the next. I'm really excited to see um, the second the second version of this. So
Yeah, have you?
begins today.
So you actually, you I guess you've never produced that. You're only in the sense of um, still brewing and making it and aging all of the second batch of your maybe more, for lack of a better word, flagship barrel age. You know, Sang Froid being the first one, um, which was phenomenal. We even drank, because Brad brought the I think we had like a Magnum on Christmas Day. It was like, I love that beer so much. It's fantastic, and it was like a real special beer. And it was really great, and I was really, it was just so cool to see, because I know we were there a year and a bit ago before the world changed, and just got to see it. And it was exciting to see the actual result of that. I don't really recall experiencing that before, going through and seeing it sort of in its infancy, and then being able to taste it in its end, and seeing that come back. I think that's super cool. I had a question about the barrel system. So at the end of, it seems like primarily you guys are focusing on, I was about to say sours, but I don't know if I would really call these sours. It's barrel aged farmhouse ales that have multiple characteristics, and part of those characteristics are sour slash tart. Um, have you considered any other type of barrel age? I mean, literally any of the other styles, whether it's a lager I've heard of, I've had barrel aged lagers, things like that, or things like that. Have you considered things like that?
Yeah, there's a lot of things we would love to be able to do or experiment with. Um, we like something like a bourbon barrel aged stout is probably not high on the list of priorities. Not that I don't like those beers that do. Um, Barrel aged lager sounds great as well, but we are we're really intrigued by the results we've had from this culture. So like Sang Froid, Spinning Yarn, Orpheus, Pale Fire, which we're going to try after this. They all come from the same sort of like living cultures that define our barrels, and we have really not gone too deep into like the different ways this could be modulated or pushed in different directions. It's a living product, and the balance of organisms in every barrel is a little different, and there's just so much to discover in that that's currently our focus. Beyond that, like space, like Avling's a big building. It's a very big building, but it's all the space we have, and that space is at a huge premium right now.
Yeah.
Because we just can all of our beer now, and it's that just takes more space for us versus kegs, and our ability to like turn over beer is different.
Right.
Turning over kegs, you realize the space immediately. Turning over cans, you don't, because it's on a pallet, and you sort of have to empty the pallet before you realize that space savings. Versus a keg, 2 at a time, you get 2 more spaces back once you sell 2 kegs. So at the time being, different types of barrel aging projects are sort of on hold, but not, I would love to do everything, but I am in no way disappointed that we have to focus on the barrels we have, because we already have things in the barrels that have flavors we've never had before, and we're discovering right now how to blend with them and how to potentially search out those flavors in the future, and which of those we like and which of those we want to get rid of, and how we can push this program forward. We have some other interesting barrel. We have a red wine barrel aged stout that's been packaged and will be bottle conditioning for the next few months. So we've got some cool new things that are sort of still yet to come, and a little different from anything we've done so far. But we're really happy with sort of the variety and the intrigue that we're seeing in the barrels now. So we're leaning into that.
I respect it. I love it. I mean, like, even as you were saying, I was like, I don't really think I've had like an orange wine barrel-aged farmhouse ale with marigolds before. French marigolds, let's be clear. Like it's super unique. What you guys are doing is super unique, and it's great. It's fantastic. I think it's really, you're right. You're 100% right. It's, there's no rush. We're in an interesting period of humanity right now that we all just trying to get through. You guys were fortunate that previous to all of this, you were canning a lot of stuff anyway. Obviously, not everything. Now you've had to move to everything. So I can only, as you described it, a lot of people might not really understand what that means for a brewery as far as space. And like now you got to have this room to keep these empty cans, and then when you fill them, you got to put them somewhere, and then you need refrigeration, and there's so many logistical challenges with all this stuff. So I completely get it, but perhaps do you guys have your own can? I think you have your own canning machine, right? Or are you mobile? Yeah,
we do.
Yeah,
so we do. It was an enormous boon at the beginning.
I can only imagine. Yeah, I mean, it was super fortunate that you guys were doing this stuff beforehand, and you had a great sort of people knew you as that. You got a very distinctive label always with the white and the color on the labels. You've super distinctive. You had that from the beginning, which is super key, and I imagine that's probably helped. Did you? I mean, look, let's just touch on it briefly. I know we don't want to go into it for length, for long, but obviously, this has been a pretty interesting year for breweries. On the positive side, the vast majority of breweries are still here. Some are thriving. Some have told me my revenue's the same, but my profit is a fraction because now you don't have the keg sales and stuff, and that's really eaten up a lot of profits. And I really don't think a lot of people really understand that side of it, because the packaging and what it costs for a can, and then sometimes if you have to distribute it, then you're losing on that side, and there's so many other elements to selling packaged beer. So do you want to maybe just touch on briefly how it's been for you guys, and if you've had to pivot much, being that you already had the package? It sounds like there was definitely some pivoting.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The business was designed to be a brew pub first, and we were actually being quite cautious or deliberate with who we were distributing to, and we actually, before the pandemic, from July of 2019 when we opened to when the pandemic hit, hadn't put a whole lot of effort into distribution because we wanted to understand what the volume and the demand was going to be from our own tap room. We wanted to work with bars and restaurants and licensees that took the same kind of care with the product that we did. But really, I mean, from my perspective, the business was designed to celebrate celebrate the value and the joy and the excitement of in-person dining, and the reason for the big bar and the smack dab in the middle of the room. We touched on this earlier, that the design team was excellent, but the one thing I will claim is that was sort of something I really wanted, because sitting at a bar, it's just you get such a great feel for a place, and you get to talk to people, and the interaction is a lot more authentic, and that's always what we were built around. So having to package everything and shut down our brewery, it really took the wind out of our sails, and it also forced us to approach the product and approach the process in a way that we were never really built to do. Um, Cans are single use. We've got to buy cans in every single time as opposed to reusing kegs. Taxes are higher. The taxes have killed us because kegs and cans are taxed at a different rate. So we're buying twice the cans and we're getting taxed at more than twice the rate. So
Jesus.
it you know fortunately, really fortunately, people have stepped up and at the beginning of the pandemic, actually, we were blown away by the rate at which people were ordering beer, and it was sort of we had a really tough couple month and a half where we had to furlough a lot of our staff, and a brewer, Taylor included. But before too long, we just realized people are they're still buying beer and they're buying a lot of it. So we had to bring Taylor back, and it hasn't been a boom time by any stretch, but again, we've been lucky, and we've been able to use what we've had at on site. We've been kind of resilient and scrappy, and I think by and large we've done a pretty good job.
That's great. I love to hear that the community stepped up and that you've been able to bring staff back. That's awesome. I didn't know about the double the tax on the cans. Shit, that's crazy. It's so savage, man. One thing that I do really appreciate about Ontario that I feel like didn't get any fanfare is that you're allowed to. People can open a fucking bottle shop now. I can just be like, I'm gonna rent this store and sell some chips, and I'm gonna sell local beers. That is crazy. That is Quebec level shit, man. That is some stuff that why are people not talking? Dudes have been wanting that out in Ontario for years. Someone told me 2 weeks ago, man. 2 weeks ago, I was like, why did no one tell me this? This is crazy. So anyone can just do that. I think that's if that's what this bullshit has come to allow that, people can I knew about the restaurants. People can turn restaurants into bottle shops. Breweries were allowed to purchase beers from other breweries to be able to sell it as a bottle shop, which I thought was super cool. The first one I saw was Dominion City in Ottawa. We're just bringing stuff in from Toronto and different regions for the Ottawa folks. And our blog writer is based out of there, Nathan, and he was always just getting cool stuff. I'm like, man, this is crazy. But then, he told me recently that you guys can do that. So I think that is fantastic. That is a great step forward that maybe there's going to be some independent bottle shops, really. Maybe they'll sell some charcuterie or something and alongside. Maybe they could buy your charcuterie and then sell your beer alongside, which is...
That would be great, yeah.
I don't know, it's
It is...
Please, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
It's sort of weird. It's been unfortunate, I suppose, or disappointing that it took a pandemic to kind of reach this point where not only can we have effectively private bottle shops, but also patios and public space is all of a sudden seen as this great resource, and it's no longer sidewalks and streets are no longer just a means to get people from A to B, as efficiently and as quietly as possible, but they're we've been forced to look at them in a reasonable and progressive and kind of collective manner, which is it should be, everyone should be able to have use and enjoy the public domain, which is it's a wonderful change. It's sort of disappointing that it took this long. It's still kind of weird to be able to go into a shop and buy a bunch of weird funky wine from around the world, and it feels odd that technically I'm buying the bag of chips and having the 4 or 5 bottles of wine to go with my bag of chips, because that's the actual transaction. I'm buying a meal, I'm buying some food, and it just happens to come with some wine for takeaway.
So you have to buy the chips. So it's not only the store has to stock chips, each purchase has to be take your pick of the bag of chips, and then you can buy as much more.
Because it's wine to go with a takeout food order.
I'm going to put that in context real quick, and you may relate to this a lot, being that you lived here. I live next to Montreal. Literally, I'm looking the way I'm facing. I'm like 20 to 50 meters from Montreal, like the actual mountain. You can go into any park in Montreal and drink any liquor, and as long as you had food. Only recently, like when we first moved here, it was a bag of chips. We moved here in 2012. I lived in Toronto from 2010 to 2012. Went over from there, and I remember being at Parc La Fontaine down there, and we had a bag of chips. We had like a bottle of wine, Tiffany, and we were drinking the wine. And then it happened to be a homeless guy. Was like, and our bag of chips was closed. He was like, guys, you can't just have to sit there with the bag of chips is closed. Like, you have to be eating that shit. Like, I was like, oh, okay, cool. And they recently changed the law that you can't have a bag of chips. You have to have substantial food, which is extraordinarily vague. But I think in Quebec terms, that probably means a baguette with some meat and cheese, with some charcuterie and some cheese or something. So the fact that Ontario, who was super strict about drinking in a park and stuff now, and never letting anything outside the LCBO or beer store system, now allows independent bottle shops that can sell you a bag of fucking Lay's, and now I can walk out of there with 3 bottles of wine and a 6-pack of beer. It's just, it's funny what this has brought to the world in a good way, I guess. But I just think it's funny. It's cool that I did not know that you had to buy the chips. I'm down. Who doesn't want a bag of chips?
We get people.
Well, it's like you've had to, if you're a bar that for a long time in Toronto, if you're a bar that doesn't have a kitchen,
right?
I'm sure you've seen this at some point. You require to have a food option, and most people like allow you to bring in food from somewhere else, and but you'll always see like regular bars that don't have a kitchen have like these chips that are like on the wall, and they've been there since like 2002. The same bag, because nobody's buying the chips, but they're available.
Right.
They're there. These are the sort of critical parts of the laws that keep society together.
Oh yeah,
it's so wild.
My favorite, there's a bar in Toronto called the Communist Dot or Com Dot. They took it to some sort of extreme where I think like not only would they make fun of you, they'd give you a really hard time if you ordered food, but it was just the absolute grossest microwave burrito that they could possibly find. They wouldn't defrost it for you. Or like some sort of lean cuisine or Swanson dinner. It was just the menu was horrifying, and good on them. I love that place
because it hit the law. It passed the laws, and that's all that matters.
Yeah,
and that is
there's
so
food available,
and that's it. Yeah. I guess that explains those bars that have like a cheese, like a toasted cheese press behind the counter. Like that was it. They just chuck a couple pieces of Wonder Bread and a Kraft single, and like boom, there you go. Here's your toasted cheese. Yeah, it's hilarious. It's so funny. But look, man, if this is what came of it, and I hope that you guys were able to get some new licensees out of it from these independent bottle shops, or from restaurants, or from other breweries willing to sell each other stuff. Like I've enjoyed seeing that. We don't have that here, from what I've seen, because we already have the specialty beer store thing. But you guys also have the you can mail order, I guess, people can order online and have it shipped. You guys have an online store, I would imagine, that people can order beer and such. Yeah, good.
Shop.avling.ca.
Make sure you check that. Shop.avling.ca. I love that. Like that is super key, and that's something that we're definitely missing out here. That's pretty ridiculous. The depths here can deliver technically, but the breweries can't, which is obscene. But it's just interesting watching the two, because prior to this, we were in Toronto. It's where we're always there. We were there like once a month, and my brother's there, and my girlfriend's, my mother-in-law is there, most of my friends are there, and now the borders are literally closed, so we're like locked, and we can't go the other way. You guys can't go either way. You guys are landlocked because you guys made the decision, and now we can't go there, and we can't go to New Brunswick because there's the Atlantic bubble, and even the Atlantic bubble's fucked up now because Nova Scotia had no cases, and I checked today, they had like 100 and something cases, which is a big problem there. So they definitely messed up. So like it's I'm mildly concerned that this is going, even though it's got the June 2nd date. I don't know if they'll open the borders, but it's not. Whatever. It's a longer conversation, I guess. Whether it's the borders that are the problem. If you look at Australia and New Zealand, they fixed it. There's a method out there. Just get on the phone, Doug Ford or whatever. Just call the PM, mate. They'll figure it out. Shall we? I'm concerned because it's after midnight. I'm worried about Brandon's being tired. You're looking good though, mate. You're looking good.
Up, man.
Yeah, I know. I'm still aware of it, but I haven't noticed anything, which is great. So let's do Pale Fire. I've been really excited for this one. I have not had this as a brand new one.
This is unreleased.
This is first look.
Oh, it's unreleased.
Unreleased, yeah. It's
Woo!
not released for a while.
We got the exclusive. Okay, I'm gonna go grab it and also utilize the facility. Could you guys talk through it and just explain what the beer is and in the context of like Orpheus? This is now one of the other barrel-aged beers. Yeah,
sure.
Let's go.
Yeah, this is a little less complex of a process, a little less complex of an idea, though just as good, just as delicious. This is a barrel-aged beer on peaches. Who doesn't love an Ontario peach? I think we produce some of the best peaches in the world. And we were able to get really high-quality it's called bee fruit. A lot of breweries use it. It's the fruit that is got some sort of visual blemish that means grocery stores will want to sell it, but the fruit tastes exactly the same. It's just not pretty. For us, that I would, if I could buy that fruit, I would buy that fruit because it's just as good. Sometimes it's better. When it goes into a beer, you don't see the fruit. A visual blemish is not a problem at all. So we were able to get this really, really high quality fruit and put about 1,400 pounds of peaches into a tote, which was a day, a real day. We had about 10 people processing these peaches because you got to cut them and expose the pit and the flesh and add them to the beer. We actually had to transfer Orpheus out of the tote the same day. It was quite a day. It was quite a big day.
Yeah, but, 1,400.
The results, 1,400 pounds. Yeah.
Woof.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, man. Keep talking.
Yeah, it was quite a. I mean, there's a lot of people there, and as monotonous as it gets, it's people are just kind of shooting the shit, cutting peaches forever,
Forever.
Much longer than you'd ever imagine you would possibly cut peaches. So, this just it's a really nice blend. We were really careful about the barrels that went into this blend because the fruit was such high quality. We bottle conditioned actually to a little higher degree than the rest of the bottled beers because it just kind of lifts the peach character.
Right.
We've let it bottle condition for quite a long time because it's really developing, really beautiful. So.
Oof. That is beautiful. I was really excited when I saw that this was peach. I feel like peach is one of the greatest. One of the things you said here that I really enjoyed was speak softly. And I feel like peaches speak the softest. Like they're just a beautiful fruit that are perfect for this type of thing. And even though you used arguably a metric shit ton to get them to speak softly, they're just so subtle and it almost doesn't matter how much you put in. Like they can't It's almost like they can't be too much. They never
They
overwhelm.
don't overdo it. Actually, that is generally the challenge with peaches is they speak too softly.
That's true.
Finding the right type of peaches and using the right amount and the beer that goes into them are all part of it.
So this one's pouring like super, kind of straw-colored, little opaque there, quickly dissipating head. I'm also getting that like, I don't know what color this is, kind of an orangey light pink or something, like a film at the top.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's a little nestles there. Yeah.
What's that from? That's awesome. Like the head was doing this like that volcano thing when you were pouring it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
tough. Like with this level of acidity and this amount of fruit, head retention's a challenge. It's just not really something to expect.
Oh my gosh!
The beer is really oxygen tolerant, so the foam is not as important for freshness.
Gotcha. Oh, dude, this is killer. So it's still a farmhouse base, right? Similar-ish to the other ones. We're looking at 6.7%. This is like extra fascinating to me to get this to drink with you guys the first time. So it's a blend similar to Spinning Yarn and to the which is the A and B blends and stuff like that. So kind of like that similar base, but with the 1,400. I'm gonna write that down. 1,400 pounds of obviously Ontario peaches. Yep. I love that. When you were talking about the peaches, like you were saying, you were just like, so what are you doing? You're cutting the peaches in half, removing the pits, and then keeping everything.
Pits go in.
So just cutting them in half so that they would open up and be able to be soaked up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because the skin really resists sort of like osmosis, like just drawing all that flavor out into the liquid. So if you sort of cut it in half. I mean, just imagine what would happen with a peach that's whole on your counter versus one that's half.
Gotcha.
The half one sort of melts on its own, right? So we're trying to do that obviously not in the same way. It's in the beer, so it's like very low acidity, it's totally stable, but we still need it to sort of turn into mush. And sort of exposing as much flesh as possible is really a big part of that.
Okay. No, I love that. Like, I feel like it's still got that, like, there's a ton of peach on the nose, but there's still that signature, like, that's carried across all the barrel aged products, which I appreciate. There's this sort of, like, light, lemony, citrusy kind of funkiness. Fuck, man. I just think peach just works so well with this stuff, like... It's impeccable.
I love peaches.
Oh my! They're the greatest. Like
that's honestly like I can give a long and like detailed description of all of the sort of creative work that went into Orpheus. And I don't. This is in no way less valuable, but the creative work that went into Pale Fire is that the beer tastes good, the peaches taste good. Let's put them together. That's like really it. It's like these just beautiful fruit and really great beer we're really proud of.
I love it, man.
You don't overcomplicate it. Just put good with
just
yeah. The in when Brandon was talking about the barrel program earlier, it's sort of we've been really fortunate that thus far with we started with 12 barrels and we've added another 8, right? Yeah. And each of them have, or at least there are groups of them that have kind of drifted off into different directions. And so, really the most complicated thing about this beer was looking at the barrels that we had and kind of knowing what is so great about peaches and what is like the juiciness and the intensity and the kind of mouth-watering character. It was just... what blend can we come up with that's going to maximize this? That was really the, not to oversimplify it or to take anything away from the brewers, but it seemed as though it was just, looking at these nice threads that were sort of, that we had at our disposal and setting up the best possible base and then just, slamming it with peaches.
I love it.
Mhm.
When does this one drop for people who are curious?
Midsummer.
Midsummer. Okay.
Midsummer.
Oh, we're getting a real exclusive right here. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
sick.
you're way ahead of the curve as usual.
So, mate, I love it. I appreciate it genuinely because this is. I'm so impressed with all the barrel stuff, and I'm really been enjoying it. And I feel like, is it worth keeping? Like, can I sit on some of them for a bit? Like the sang, kind of chuck it a sang fire and Orpheus in for another year or two or something like that, or like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, based on the principles of how it's made, it should be stable for a long time.
Okay.
A long time. I can't speak to what it will taste like in 5 years because we're not 5 years into our program. So
Of course.
I don't have a reference point for that. However, all of the beers, the earliest bottlings, are continuing, to my palate, at least, they're continuing to improve.
Okay.
They also go
Good.
through cycles. Like
Mm.
I found this especially on the ones that are fruited in some way, based on how they develop over time. The fruit, and this includes the wineskins, the fruit comes up and then it comes down and then it comes up, depending on what's going on and the balance of the development of the sort of yeast and Brettanomyces derived characteristics.
Mhm.
They change the balance. So it's really intriguing to drink it over time.
I'm genuinely excited for that because I've tried it sort of, early on, a bit young, and I say same for in like fall when it came out. Then again,
Mm-hmm.
at I think I had a couple bottles, and then Brad had like the Magnum, so we had that on Christmas Day and shared that with everyone. That was super cool. And now Orpheus a few months ago. Now again, and I don't know if I'm just appreciating it differently because I'm talking to you guys or something, but I'm like, wow, I feel like it's like different or something. And this one, so now it'd be cool to like sit on some of those guys and try them later this year or literally this time next year and see, just like you guys are learning at the same time, excuse me, how this stuff goes.
Yeah, we're sitting on and cellaring quite a bit of this because we have a lot of confidence this is going to be really intriguing as like an old cellar bottle. If it's cellared correctly, it will it should develop for years, to be honest. And that doesn't mean that like everyone's going to think it's the best at 4 years, but it's going to change and develop new characteristics. And some people might like it most at 4 years. Some people might want it most fresh. Right? I'm the same way. There's certain beers I know that I can cellar that I want to drink at a certain point. Orval is the clearest example for me. I don't want it to get too old.
No.
It's like a critical transition period where I think Orval is like the perfect beer for me. And when it's too old, I still love it. It's still really good. It's not where I want it to be. But that's what's really cool about these beers is that like if you want to buy something like this and sit on it for a year or two and get it to the point that you think it's going to be the best, then you have that opportunity, just like wine. Drink it at the front end of its ideal period, or drink it at the back end of its ideal. It's up to you.
Yeah. Max, you were saying?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think we're really excited to kind of start to see the unfolding of that process, and we were very deliberately kind of stashing away bottles of this to see how it develops. But the only thing I was going to chip in was that I think if people were interested in cellaring some of these, I think the clear candidates for me at least are the wineskin beers, particularly Sang Froid. It was sort of remarkable, and it makes sense when you think about it. But I can't remember how this came about, but we tasted some that had been open for a little while, and it had developed and taken on oxygen in the exact same way that red wine would, and why wouldn't it? It's got a lot of the same tannins, and it's it's sat on the red wineskins for a significant period of time. So those, you know, uh, tannic characters and that red wine nature, that red wine ability to carry age well, um, is in Saint Foy, and so that's one that I'm particularly keeping my eye on. But same with Orpheus, and you know, to you know, slightly lesser extent, Pale Fire and the Spinning Yarns, but I mean they've been made carefully, and the culture is strong. It's you know, or Brandon really was quite deliberate in building it up and crafting it quite deliberately, and I think you know, it should have legs. It should develop in really interesting ways for some time to come.
I love it. I mean, really curious. Yeah, I think you make a good point, particularly with Orpheus and Saint Foy being that they're on the wine skins. I think they would, you know, those type of beers, just like wine, do age well. I wonder what will happen with like something like peach, because you're using real fruit as opposed to puree. So does it drop? Like, you know, Brandon, you were saying that it kind of goes in waves. Like, I wonder how that will go. It's going to be interesting to see how that
It'll
goes.
be interesting. I mean, the easiest sort of comparison you can make, and not to compare our beer to this, but the way like fruited lambics develop over time is really intriguing.
Right.
The something like Fufun or Saint Lanvinus or a creek from like the Canning Creek or something.
Yeah.
You know, when they're young and fresh, the fruit character is dominant. They go through a transition period where the fruit and the sort of like beer-derived funk are in balance, and then late in their life, if they're a fruited version, the fruit is like a really interesting but integrated portion, like a component of the beer, and you know, just describing those three things, those are three very different things. So if you're looking for a fruit-forward beer, you should drink it fresh. But if you are curious to see how these things kind of integrate over time, that opportunity is there as well. And so with Pale Fire, I think, you know, if you sat on this for a couple of years, I think it would develop some really interesting, like deep cellar notes. But the freshness of the peaches would come down. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just going to change the balance of the beer. The peaches will still be there. The peaches are not going to go away. They're just going to sort of settle into the rest of what's going on.
I think it's interesting. I think the optimal situation for any kind of beer like this, you want to buy like 4 of them at least, so you can like try one immediately, young, fresh, exactly, you know. Maybe another one in 6 to 12 months, you know, 6, maybe 12, and then sit on another one for a year or two and see how that changes, so that you really get to learn the beer and you know, and remember, at least, you know, even if you take notes or something, like just to kind of you know, document it, because it's interesting. And like you guys are an interesting experiment with this, because you could look at like the examples you just gave of the lambics, who have been around for hundreds of years, if not longer. You know, they know what's happening with all their stuff, but you guys are still super fresh, and you know, you've got Saint Foy being probably the oldest, but only just, if I'm not mistaken. You know, it was only just the one that came out just before the rest of the other bad boys, and you're still learning how, you know, how these guys are going to. So anyone who purchases it with you gets to learn how this thing ages as you guys get to learn, because you guys don't know anymore. The time's passing all at the same time. So it's a kind of unique opportunity for the beer community to be able to kind of learn along with the brewery, which I think is super cool. And now I've spoken to you guys, because like right behind the camera here, I have this cabinet under the TV with a bunch of like, you know, my little mini cell. I got some other stuff in the room, but I keep it under there. And I got a couple bottles of Saint Foy, and I think I had a couple bottles of Orpheus in there. And I was like, I think I want to ask you, and I'm glad you got the answer now. Now I'm kind of like, I'm gonna let these bad boys sit for a bit and just
You can let them sit. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
see how she
we're playing
goes.
around with things. We're playing around with things like we bottled some Sang Froid still
Okay.
last year to see what that tastes like after a year. We've yet to taste it.
When you say
but
still,
it's
you mean not carbonated, right? Nothing that we carbonated or carbonated.
No, we added just enough sugar to make sure that like the bottle pressurized just a little bit. But when you'd opened it, it would be, the equivalent of opening a natural wine.
Gotcha.
It might have a little bit of effervescence, but it's not carbonated. So we're playing around with these kinds of things, different ways to age the beers, and different ways to maybe present them, which for us is like really really cool. It's a very interesting long term project because we bottled that Sang Froid a year ago basically.
Yeah, I guess you would have, right, to release in the fall to let it sort of settle for a bit.
July.
Yeah, pretty much a year ago. Yeah.
July.
The
Yeah.
earlier, like we had two Sang Froid bottlings, same batch, but like slightly different bottlings. So the earliest Sang Froid was more than a year, at least a year on the newer one.
Damn.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
February.
Yeah, so like
February.
we haven't touched it.
Yeah.
I've never tasted the Sang Froid still. We're just not touching it because we really want to see what it tastes like on the long term.
Right, so it's not even like a shot, like you don't even want to tap one in like now-ish or whatever in a year. You want to wait the longer term.
No.
Excuse me. Yeah.
With something like a still bottling, I feel like age is the sort of goal.
Gotcha.
You're treating it like wine. You want like élevage. You want to give it a long time in the bottle to reach maturity. So
that's cool.
I know myself well enough to know if I open a bottle at 8 months and it tastes awesome, I'm gonna want to open another bottle. And now I'm fighting myself every day or every week or whatever, and like I have self-control, I can handle it, but I'd rather just not taste it in the first place and get as far as you can before you start tasting it. So
Gotcha.
it's buried. We buried it in under the stairs. It's nice and cool there. We're gonna let it sit there.
Just
There's
live.
4 cases in front of it. Yeah, it's like 4 layers deep.
So
Can't
you
get
have
at
to. It's smart.
I can't get at it. Yeah, I'm just gonna have to forget about it.
It's the only way. When are you gonna crack it? Is that like a 3-year, 5-year? What's the goal for something like that?
I think we'll probably crack the first one around 18 months. 18 months to 2 years.
Oh, that's doable. You can wait.
So it's coming up.
Yeah, it's coming up. It's almost like, man, the way that the time's moving now, fuck, every day is the same, bro. I don't even know.
But then we're gonna have to like put like 6 more layers in front of it.
Oh yeah, then it's gonna be a problem.
Then I'm screwed. Yeah, I'm gonna need. So I actually need someone to hide it.
Take it to Max's house.
I don't know.
That's not going to help. That's the opposite.
Put it in the kitchen. I don't know, somewhere.
We
that's not going to help.
Not gonna help either.
Put the beer in the kitchen.
Put the beer in the
It'll be safe. It'll be safe there.
Yeah, exactly.
Those guys won't drink it.
We set aside some things for like deliberately with our first anniversary in mind, and like we weren't able to celebrate our first anniversary with the public, and fingers crossed that we'll be able to do something with the public for a second.
When is the exact anniversary, man?
We did a private party. We did a birthday party for our first ever public event, public kind of in the space, eating, drinking, on June 24th, and we had then a couple friends and family events after that. But the sort of legitimate opening was July 3rd, 2019.
2019. Okay, so you didn't get to do it really last year. I mean, patios were open in July, I think, but like. Nope. They weren't.
Not July. Well, they were open in July, but in Ontario, not by July 3rd. It was a little later in the month.
A little later. Okay. Jeez, man.
Yeah.
I didn't
So we
remember.
kind of had our hands tied in terms of not we were forced not to share all the stuff we'd set aside for our anniversary. You know, we had to kind of bury it back underneath the stairs and forget about
Keep
it
it
for
away
a
from
year.
Brandon
So,
and you.
exactly.
Do you have anything that you are, in the knowledge of kind of where the world is at now? Last year kind of took us by surprise, to be, really fair to everybody. We didn't really know what was happening, and it was kind of like, oh, but it's only going to be for a couple of weeks. Oh, no, another more, So we didn't know what was going to happen. Being that 2021, fuck, man, like it seems like it's going to be basically the same shit. Do you have any sort of 2-year releases that you can maybe slightly talk about, or anything that you're maybe planning to, maybe if it's not like a party type of situation, which obviously is what everybody wants, you know, isn't always the way. Is there something that maybe, just some special
Yeah.
releases or something?
I mean, obviously, it's not going to be a big party the way we'd like it to be, but the benefit of having to sit on everything for our first anniversary means that, we will get a little bit of mini vertical tasting
Oh, that's cool.
for some of these barrel beers and some of the stuff we've stashed away for a year. I think it's a pretty good chance we'll be able to have some kind of public interaction come early July.
I hope so.
And nothing deliberate that we've kind of from day one pre-pandemic set aside and said we're not going to touch this for 1-2 years, but we're always the interesting thing, I think, and what's exciting often about day-to-day work at Avling is that the projects tend to be what you're working on that day tends to it's only going to be realized a couple months in the future at least, which means that we're sort of our minds are always cast a little bit forwards, and so there's some really exciting things coming up for the summer. I know the fall and winter, like especially. Brandon mentioned the Imperial Stout and that we did release this past winter. We sat on some and going to be releasing it again. The red wine barrel aged stout will probably also make its debut come the fall. So we've always got kind of an eye to 4 to 6 months in the future.
You don't really have a choice, I guess, right? But I mean, that's the nature of this style, so it's kind of convenient, I guess, even, really.
It works for us. We make a lot of our beer slow, or even our lagers, which are clean and a very different production process. We give it a lot of time. So between can conditioned saisons, lagers, barrel aged beers, so much of our production is slow. Give the beer time to really realize its full potential. So, there's enormous challenges of this pandemic, but a small silver lining is that there's been opportunities to take some time to expand those programs and figure out how we might be able to integrate them into a regular production cycle where we still are selling 10 kegs of Pilsner in a week, which is a future I dream of.
I hope we get that. That's the optimal. That's the idea. Goddamn it!
Yeah.
I feel like we'll get there. It seems possible looking at some of the other places in the world. So we're a little slow out here in Canada for some godforsaken reason, but we'll get there. Yeah, no, I love it. I'm just realizing how we're going 3.5 hours, which is completely expected. To be honest, I knew this was going to be a good one with you guys. I'm conscious of your time. If we feel like we've kind of covered everything, I feel like we've run through 6 beers, which is pretty damn good. 6 beers and drank basically all of them, and I'm not trashed, which is very convenient.
That's our style. Low alcohol.
Tiff, this is the second time Tiff's asked me for that beer. Pale Fire is
it's a good sign.
Insane.
Tiff's got a good palate.
She does. She's into, she's loving that. She's just like, even before, she was just giving me the, like, "Ooh, yeah, like the ugly face when you're like, ooh, yeah, like you do that, like when you listen to Jay-Z, No, like this stuff is phenomenal. Honestly, guys, like I really respect you both. I think everything you're doing is fantastic. I've been a fan for since you guys opened. I've been obviously following since as early as I could and keeping an eye on it. And you've been kind enough to make sure I'm staying up on everything, and it's been really cool to actually sit with you both and just sort of hear the way that it all came about and what it all really means, and the thought process that went behind everything. And knowing Brandon for as long as I have, I kind of expected that. And now I learned, Max, what you've been doing and all of that culinary history and brewing history. All of this makes a lot of sense and really just has allowed. I kind of feel like I understand the brand even a little more than I did before, which is what I was hoping to get out of this, and I hope everybody watching and listening will feel the same. Congratulations for real on everything. You guys are just doing this good ass beer, man. Like some really quality craft beer, and you really care. And it's always been evident from the product that was the case. But it's so cool to hear it from you guys directly. Like I was saying, the thought process behind it and everything. And I'm really happy for you guys. I'm proud of you guys. I think it's amazing. It's I really hope everything can open up so more people can come through. I want to see this goddamn garden. I want them to open the damn border so I can come and return my empties.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah,
But-
we're waiting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Matter of
We'll fill
time.
'em up for you. Yeah.
Yeah, filling them up, right? I'm like, no, I'm genuinely, I appreciate both of your time, man. Like, I really fuck with it. I just think all this stuff is fire, and it's, I'm just consistently impressed with everything you guys are doing, and I love the dedication to everything, and, man, more
Thank you.
success, more success. It's I love
Thank you
it.
so much.
You guys are champions. Thank you as well for hanging out with me for so long. This is, this has been
It's been a pleasure.
genuinely, I've enjoyed this. I knew this was going to be great. I was genuinely looking forward to this. We've got the small cans so we could try so many different beers, and everything is a reasonable ABV, so nobody is, off their head, So I appreciate that. So, both of you guys, thank you very, very much. Where can everybody find Avling online, or yourselves if you would like to be found?
Our website, all of our sort of contacts are pretty straightforward. Website, avling.ca. Socials are all avlingto. And the store is shop.avling.ca.
Perfect. Does either of you want to be found personally, or it's like keep them finding Avling? No. You're like, Avling, that's you.
It's the only thing worth checking out.
I respect
Yeah.
it. I respect it. I'm gonna wrap this up. Do you guys want to just hang on? Once I wrap it up and I end the thing, we'll stick around. We'll finish up on the offline real quick. But both you guys, once again, Max, Brandon, genuinely appreciate you both. Thank you very much for your time and candidness and just really like being honest and everything about how you guys are doing it. I really hope everybody learned a lot with all of this. So I genuinely appreciate you both. Everyone who was watching and listening, thank you so much for that. If you enjoyed the episode, smash the thumbs up. Hit subscribe below. Hit the notification bell so you know when the new drops. Follow us on social media at BAOS Podcast, and check out the long form audio so you can hear attractive gentlemen like Brandon and Max talk about craft beer every week. We are back. I think it's next Friday is the next one at 9 p.m. Eastern. Check out the social. We will be there. We'll see you in the next episode, guys. Peace.